Hello and Merry Christmas, everybody. You're listening to episode 36 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. The very last podcast from us, the good people of Lookout Sir, this year, 2019. Joining me for this intro segment, at least, is my good buddy Phil. How you doing, Phil?
No, I'm very good, thank you.
Are you enjoying the Christmas period so far? Has it been a good opportunity for all your hobbying fun, or have you been doing very little of that in favour of decorating houses and or other things?
I've been eating my weight in Quality Street, basically.
Has your house started to fill up with Quality Streets already?
Yeah, we've got them in. We've already gone through the first pack. We're on the second imminently. It's already prepped to one side, waiting to go.
It's a dangerous game.
Yeah, but I haven't actually got much hobbying done per se.
No.
I've sort of been milling around with a few different projects. So my Minotaurs is one of them, which I've made a bit of progress on, but haven't really done a huge amount since our last podcast. I've been then looking at what to take for the upcoming GT final in January and going, will I have time to build and paint anything new?
Yeah.
And as much as I want to, I probably won't have time. But I did do a proper Maths Hammer deep dive into the most efficient unit that the Astra Militarum have for killing Primaris Marines. And hands down is the Macarius Vulcan.
There you go. You got the calculator out and you started doing the sums, did you?
Well, exactly. So I think on average, Maths Hammer wise, you're definitely going to kill at least 6 of them. I think up to 8, depending on if you give yourself some re-rolls.
Yeah.
Like the Trojans and stuff, or, special abilities. But yeah, it's the best one that's going to most reliably kill stuff, because it's got a fixed number of shots. So it does 15 shots, it doubles it if you're stationary, so 30 shots, basically. Strength 6, -2, I think, and 2 damage.
Pretty reasonable. Very good at killing Primaris Marines, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So there
Is
you
it
go.
better than Imperial Knight, though, Phil?
Well, this is the thing. It's the best Astra Militarum unit. It's not probably the best.
Oh, well, yes, because you want to get that doctrine bonus.
Well, no, not even. I mean, even with a doctrine bonus, it's,
There isn't one, but,
Well, you could, because you could run it in a, Supreme Command detachment and give it a doctrine bonus.
No, I mean, like the Space Marines get.
Yeah, he's just moaning because they're not as good as Space Marines, essentially.
Well, no, of course it's not. But then neither are Knights either, I guess.
But there you go. I should say as well, I didn't get a chance to introduce him. What I was going to do, I was going to explain what Quality Streets were to those who don't know, because obviously some of our listeners don't, herald from the UK, and I can't speak with absolute confidence when I say this, but I don't think America has Quality Streets. But if you do, I apologise. But not because I'm apologising for you having to have Quality Streets, more I apologise for assuming you don't know what they are. But they're essentially a selection of sweets, or candies, if you will. I don't really feel very comfortable using that word to describe sweets, but essentially they're little bits of chocolate or toffee or something mixture there are of, which comes in a nice tin, and they're all nicely wrapped. And around Christmas time, here in the Britons, we like to fill our houses with them. Although, not Rich, I was going to say. Rich is more of a fan of celebrations, and he's here right now. So, how you doing, Rich?
I was going to say, how are you connecting me with Quality Street?
I was going to basically offer the alternative, because I know you're a celebration household, is that not right?
That is true. They are celebrating. Our family are very keen and important on celebrations. Every year we math hammer the celebrations for it began many years ago, that me and my sister our gran got me and my sister a type of celebrations for Christmas, and then we did swapsies to who could get the best. And ever since then, we've been keeping track of how the split of the celebrations is in every single year. So for the last decade, we've been getting a ton of celebrations and seeing what the average is in each one.
It's incredible. It's one of the highlights of my Christmas, the Richie breakdown of the celebrations. I mean, the levels of analytics that you've got into, the graphs, the year-on-year comparisons.
Oh, yeah.
It's utterly fantastic, mate. It's honestly, in a way, I look forward to it more than Christmas, I feel, these days. Or at least it's become part of my Christmas. So Yeah, no, I'm interested to see what the results are this year. I wait with bated breath.
I'm glad that my family's confectionery habits are part of your Christmas.
Well, they are now, mate. They are now. I mean, it's part of the privilege of having known you for at least, God, is it 9 years now or just 8? It's one or the other.
Guys, it's coming up to 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, it's coming up to 10 years, mate.
God, it's a long time. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. We're getting old, mate. That's the consensus. But yeah, look, I mean,
but yeah, we do obviously feel for our American friends and listeners who don't have Celebrations or Quality Street, mostly because their confectionery is not as good.
Is that what you're going to assert now? You're going to say
I can say that with
selections are not up to the standards?
I will absolutely say that because I have some authority because I lived there for 3 years.
That's true. That's true.
I can tell you that they do not have particularly good candy in America, and it's a drawback they have. They do have some good things. They have much better Sour Patch Kids. I'll say that now. But on the whole, their chocolate isn't quite as good.
Sour Patch Kids, they've started introducing a variety of options for that. I found cola-only Sour Patch Kids the other day in Sainsbury's. They were pretty amazing.
But we don't yet have the big, giant ones which are individually wrapped.
Oh yeah, I'm not super into those. But let's not turn this into a whole talking about sweets thing. What have you been up to, Rich? You been doing much hobby lately? We haven't seen you in a while. What's going on in your world?
I've been very busy with work mostly, trying to getting things done.
Yeah.
As it were. Keeping up on the old hobby stuff. They're working on my Red Scorpions for our project coming up next year now, isn't it?
Yeah, we've had to. For those of you who even cared, and I hope some of you did. Our 1,000-point Marine Challenge has had to become probably an early 2020 project because essentially there's just been a few too many other little things going on. Tim was moving house, Sean moved house as well, and then I'm just lazy effectively. And Phil takes forever to do anything when it comes to building and painting armies. So yeah, poor old Joe steamrolled ahead and has now already painted something like 3,000 points of Celestial Lions. Rich is, bulldozed into the task and started doing lots and lots of, Red Scorpion stuff. But everyone else has been a little bit lackadaisical, unfortunately. But, we'll sort ourselves out and get on it in the new year. But it's cool to hear that you made good progress with it.
Enjoying those. I kind of want to get them. Not that I'm not enjoying them. I kind of want to get them done. I'm at that point now where I've got because I've been busy with work. I've got too many mini projects that I want to get done now. I've got the Red Scorpions, I've got the Imperial Fists, and I really want to do a Seraphim list, a Seraphim only list of Sisters of Battle. So there's a few little things I'm kind of juggling that I can't do all of these at once, and I should know better, but I clearly don't.
There you go. But it's exciting though, man. I think obviously it's cool that we're now coming to the end of 2019. Obviously 2019 has been a really interesting year for the 40k hobby. In 2019 we saw the final of the kind of mainstay faction codexes coming into existence with Genestealer Cult launching in the first part of this year, and then obviously we started to see new additions to the hobby with the Chaos Knights and other things coming through, either the Psychic Awakening or the early additions to the whole Vigilus campaign. Obviously lots of Chaos stuff, lots of Space Marine stuff. I mean, it's been a really interesting year for the hobby, but I think broadly, we could probably suggest that it has also felt quite transitional. Obviously, we can't speak with any authority when we say this, but it seems to be looking at how things are shaping up, that it's probably likely that a new edition of Warhammer 40,000 is on the horizon. The Psychic Awakening feels like it's moving in that direction. I mean, what do you reckon, Phil? Do you think that's all coming around the corner?
Yeah, quite likely. I mean, it does feel like this Psychic Awakening is a bit of not quite a holding pattern, but it's tying us over until something else comes down the line. It's just trying to give every army something new, rules-wise, sometimes a model, nothing necessarily groundbreaking per se. And it does feel like, it's either every year there tends to be a kind of core summer release. So it's either an Age of Sigmar edition, which I think only lasted two editions. Like Age of Sigmar 1 lasted 2 years before Age of Sigmar 2 came out. I think 40K's lasted a bit longer because this year we didn't have anything. So to me, it feels like next year, if there is going to be a 9th edition of 40K, it will be then.
You don't consider Apocalypse a thing?
I mean, it was, and that was their big release, but it wasn't the major tentpoles of 40K or Age of Sigmar.
I think their major release for this year was Space Marines. Let's be honest, that's their big release of 2019. Space Marines definitely have shifted a lot of units, and don't forget they also had Shadow Spear, which was a massive box set as well.
No, for sure.
That did great business. So there's been some really cool stuff in 2019, but I'm very excited to see what 2020 has to offer. But also, just so everyone is aware, in a few days' time after this podcast comes out, hopefully on Christmas Day, in celebration of the various things that's taken place in 2019, myself, Phil, Rich, and Joe, alongside potentially Tim, maybe others, will be gathering to record and deliver the big fat 40k quiz of the year. So those of you who've listened to us regularly might recall that we used to do, or we will still continue to do now and again, quizzes. We've had a lot of work on trying to refine what that format actually is going to be going forwards, but we're really keen on them. I think it's a really nice USP of the show, and something that definitely is very rewarding for us and for everyone involved, because it's just fun to get together and have a little bit of a test of knowledge. But yeah, the Big Fat Quiz of the Year, or rather the Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year, will be releasing on Christmas Day. Fingers crossed. I reserve the right to potentially fail to deliver it, but if that is the case, we will certainly be releasing it soon after Christmas Day. But look, I mean, there's going to be potentially quite a lot of editing, because for the first time ever, we're essentially going to be filming what is effectively a podcast segment and putting that out on YouTube in video form, as well as obviously putting it out through our podcast platforms. There will become some interesting nuances with that, because if I'm not mistaken, Rich, there's going to be some picture rounds, right?
There should be pictures, could be videos, we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, but you don't.
I thought you were going to say even you don't know yet.
I mean, to some degree, I don't know. At the time we're recording this, but it's going to be great. It's going to be exciting, and we hope everyone plays along at home and has a good time.
Yeah, exactly. It's our Christmas gift to you, our fine listeners, the Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year. And hopefully it's something that will continue to develop and deliver year on year on year as we march forwards into our inevitable demise. But nonetheless, the Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year is something that we're really excited to be able to bring to you guys, and hopefully you enjoy it. It's going to be a real labour of love, because essentially we film it on Sunday, the 22nd, and then I will effectively be slaving away, editing it and smashing it together over the course of the 2 days before Christmas. And this is going to be, I'm assuming it's going to be about an hour and a half segment, or show, as it were, standalone show. But it will involve lots of video, lots of audio, lots of editing fun. So, yeah, wish me luck, and all things being equal, you'll be seeing that on Christmas morning. So, maybe watch it instead of the Queen's speech. But maybe not. It depends. I don't know what people's Christmas routines are. Are you a Queen's speech family in your home, Rich?
Not really. I mean, I say that. I don't. I mean, it'll be on. We're usually having Christmas dinner at that point.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. How about you,
Christmas
Phil?
dinner is very important in our family.
Well, true. As it is for many. How about you, Phil? You much of a Queen's speecher?
No, do you know what? I like the idea of it, but I don't think I've ever actually sat down and watched one.
There you go. This is potentially kind of busting people's expectations, or altering people's ideals of what a British household is like at Christmas. Because I have to admit, it's not really ever factored into my Christmas routine. I know people sort of talk about it, but never really seems to ever become a thing. Not to sort of sound unfair about it.
It's good to know none of us will ever be able to be Prime Minister then.
Well, there you go. let's not go down that rabbit hole, mate. That's a whole different thing that no one needs to be talking about at this point. What they need to be talking about is the segments that will appear on this podcast. There's only 2, but they're quite lengthy. The first one is me, Phil, and Joe are going to be talking through our general opinions of 2019. So 2019, our hobby accomplishments, our general thoughts and feelings about what's happened and what we expect to see in 2020 and beyond. So it's just more of a retrospective on the year and us generally kind of getting all, welled up with pride about all the things we've accomplished or haven't during the course of 2019. And then the next segment will be myself, Rich, and Phil talking about Maelstrom. So Eternal War Maelstrom. We talk about it for quite a considerable amount of time. No spoilers, but we are quite keen on it now, and hopefully after you hear what we have to say, you'll feel the same. So before I move on, Rich, I know you don't appear in the outro or the next segment, so would you like to wish all the listeners anything in advance of 2020 and or the Christmas season?
I hope the Red Gobbo brings you everything you wanted.
There you go. And with that said, guys, we're going to crack on and bring you episode 36 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. As always, please consider liking and subscribing if you're on a platform that allows that. And if you're doing anything on one of the other ones, maybe considering interacting with their various variables. 5-star reviews, share it with your friends, say things, tell us what you think, follow us on Instagram. All of the usual begging applies. But yeah, let's crack on, shall we? Transitional noise. Woo! Hello everyone, and welcome to this part of the podcast where we do our lovely little retrospective piece on the events or hobby instances that have filled up our 2019. For this segment of the podcast, I'm joined by Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
There you are, lovely Joe. And of course, Phil. How you doing, Phil?
Always very good, thank you.
Always very good.
Always
My
very
goodness. I feel like I have evidence to the contrary there, Joe. Not Joe, you're Phil. There you go. That's probably where I got confused. I thought you were Joe. Joe's never always happy.
I'm the living embodiment of excitement.
You are excitement made manifest, as they like to say in this hobby.
Although I am having to do this podcast with a dull ache in my head, as my skull is being slowly crushed by the band from my dressing gown.
It's true, Joe. Your incredibly low-budget solution to hands-free communications is quite incredible.
I know. And for those who don't understand, I left my headphones at work when I normally do my recording. So I've had to basically strap the phone to the side of my head as to save myself from having to sit here for 2 hours holding my phone next to my head.
That's commitment.
That is commitment. I mean, to think, me and Phil have got our, relative setups. I'm sat here in my little office space in my house with my, monitors and webcams and microphones and all the kind of normal nonsense that you would associate with live streaming and funds of that nature. Phil's got his laptop in his hobby shed. Though you're not in the hobby shed currently, are you, Phil?
No, it's still far too cold.
Far too cold for the hobby shed. And there's Joe with a mobile phone taped to his head.
Yeah. That's how I live my life now.
That's it, mate. I don't know. I couldn't think of an example of someone who would be doing that kind of thing. But, well done you, Joe, for your ingenuity and your ingenuity. And general all-round smarts. But look, 2019 was broadly an interesting year for the hobby of Warhammer 40,000. Lots of really exciting and, new things happened. But then at the same time, not much happened at all, I suppose. But, we're going to go through the business of talking about our hobby highlights for 2019. Things that we did, things that we got involved in, things that, we really felt was a highlight of our 2019. So that could just be specific releases that we got excited about, some tournaments that we attended and performed well within, or new models that we painted and created. I suppose, Joe, from the outset, it's probably worth asking you, how many armies have you started and sold in the year 2019?
I don't think I've actually sold any armies yet.
Oh, really?
lies. You sold your Deathwatch at least.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I've sold. So I've started a few. So I started the year on Deathwatch,
Yep, definitely
And then it
started
was
the year on
Dark Elder.
Deathwatch.
and then it was Deathwatch, and then it was Chaos Space Marines, wasn't it? 'Cause
Yeah,
I tried-
you had Chaos Space Marines. I remember those. You got all
No,
excited
they-
about the Heretica Astartes release in, what was that, March?
Yeah,
And they
and
barely
then-
got out of the box before you flogged them all.
I played at least 2 games against his Chaos Space Marines.
yeah.
Oh.
And then I realised that that the Black Legion are actually terrible.
Mm.
Made a horrible mistake, and then I sold those, and they paid for my Drakari.
Yes, I remember that, yes.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you did
And where are they
Harlequins.
now? Have you still got them?
Yeah, they're in the cabinet at work actually.
Oh.
Mm. You did Harlequins as well, didn't you?
I had a bit of Harlequins in there, yep.
And they're still with you?
No, they're gone.
They're gone. So, Deathwatch gone, Harlequins gone, Chaos
Yeah.
Space Marines gone.
Yeah,
But at the moment, you've still held onto your Drakari. You've started a Space Marine army as well, right?
for the 1,000-point Space Marine thing that the group's doing, I seem to have acquired probably about 3,000 points painted now.
That's good going. That's probably your biggest army ever in terms of since I've known you.
Yeah, and then I've just started my Alpha Legion army.
Hang on, Joe, hang on here. A Chaos Space Marine army? Again?
A second time round.
It's because I love my Celestial Lions. They're amazing. And I love Space Marines, but are they boring to play with. There's no Marines. The problem about Marines is they're too good. It's like Warhammer easy mode. So to combat that, I've started to go to Chaos because I know it's actually going to be a bit harder for me. And I thought about Tyranids, but I'm not painting all of that stuff. I thought about Eldar, but you do Eldar, and then other people I play against, they've got Eldar, so I was like, that's just silly. And then what else did I look at? I looked at Necrons, but they're just bad at the moment. They're just really bad. So I was just like, no.
Sisters? Did you think about the sisters?
The sisters crossed my mind, and then I was just like, no, because they're not getting released until January. I don't want to have just a box of sisters, basically. So I bin that idea off.
Fair enough.
I had a sideways look at Tau for a while as well, but then it's just the army's just drones and riptides, and that just doesn't sound very exciting to me. That's just more Marines.
I mean, it doesn't have to be just drones and riptides.
That
There
is
are
true.
models in the collection.
Yeah,
You could have those flyers that no one takes. I don't even know the names of them.
the Tiger. Is it not? No,
The Tiger Shark?
Tiger Shark's one of them, but I
Is
don't
it?
think it's a flyer. I
that's
think
the Forge-Roll one, though, isn't it? The Tiger Shark, the Barracuda.
The Barracuda?
Barracuda and the Mantis, but I think the Mantis is the giant Forge Rod one.
Nah, it wouldn't be a mantis, would it? Wouldn't it be the manta? Keeping on the fish themes.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
The clownfish? Is there a clownfish amongst the Tau flies?
Is that a sort of Harlequin crossbreeded with
Yeah,
Tau?
quite possibly. Yeah, Harlequin crossbred with Tau. Yeah, absolutely. That would have been quite brilliant. So what we're basically getting at, Joe, in the span of 2019, you've started and sold. So you've started 6 armies by my count.
Well, you also said you're doing Chaos as Alpha Legion, but that's not quite true, is it? Because you started off doing
I
Night
painted
Lords.
2 Night Lords models.
Yeah.
And I test played that army for a while, and then decided that the Night Lords.
A while being what, 2 weeks?
Yeah, the Night Lords, although being really, really cool, their trait isn't that good, and it only comes up like 1 in 10 games, basically.
And what's the trait? The leadership debuff thing.
You're -1 leadership for every unit of Night Lords within 6 inches of you, up to a maximum of 3.
Mm.
But you can get it through, so if you've got so you have -3, and then if you've got a unit of Raptors, that becomes -4. If you've got the Nurgle Icon of Despair, that goes to 5. Then there's a Warlord trait that makes it -6. And then if you hit them with a Butcher Cannon, that's another -2, so that becomes -8 kind of thing. So it's massive
killing squads there.
Yeah, you're absolutely ruining people. But you either the units you send in either overkill and you just end up just sat on your own, or you'll try and wrap a unit and then they'll take a leadership test and fail it enough that they can just remove all the models, so you're not wrapping them anymore.
Are you not split firing, so you're only doing 1 or 2 wounds on lots of units, and then hopefully making them all take lots of leadership tests?
But the problem is, in the moment in the game, is everyone's just running min squad, tiny little squads of stuff. So even against Space Marines, if you're playing against most people, they're just running 5-man squads of Marines. So if you kill one of those and then put them at -leadership 8, then most of them are all gone, basically, from that. Or none at all. And it's just ugh. It's not exciting. Whereas with Alpha Legion, you've got the cool across the board -1 to be hit, which is useful all game. And they've got some cool stratagems and stuff. So I was just Alpha Legion it is, because Alpha Legion was my first Heresy army.
So Space Marines too easy, Night Lords too not easy enough, and then Alpha Legion a nice balance in between the two.
Pretty much, yeah. And they've got cool shenanigans and stuff.
But let's be honest with ourselves, Joe. How long until they become Iron Warriors?
Well, there is going to be an Iron Warriors.
Oh God, they're coming back! They're coming back.
It will be my 4th or 5th iteration of Iron Warriors.
They're going to be Iron Warriors, Phil.
They are Joe's quintessential.
He loves them.
When I think about Joe and what army he has, it's those guys.
Totally. Joe, why are you even resisting, mate? Just get yourself an Iron Warriors army again.
Well, I've got 6 obliterators here. Well, no, I've got 4. I'm getting 2 more, and I've got 2 boxes of Havocs.
Okay.
So they're all going to be painted as Iron Warriors, basically.
Okay. So, not long to go, Phil, before the Iron Warriors. He'll play a few games with them and go, the Alpha Legion are all right, but the Iron Warriors, oh,
the Iron Warriors are brilliant.
Yeah. And then as time goes on, all Iron Warriors all the time. Well, there you go. There's a nice little insight into Joe's ongoing, chasing the meta, so to speak. His ongoing hobby butterflyness, which is always cool. Yeah. I think, it has been a relatively slow year for Joe, though, in that regard. I've only actually bought 1 army off you this year, Joe.
I know. I need to. I did message you a couple of weeks ago, about a month or so ago, and I was like, do you want to buy a Dark Eldar army?
Yeah, but then you decided not to sell it.
Yeah, because I was like, they'll come back around and they'll be good again.
I mean, I would buy it off you if you were looking to sell it.
No, I have to keep it. I
mean, you don't have to keep it.
Yeah. The thing is, I've got another game against Winters in February, and I promised him I'd bring my Dark Eldar, so I need them. But I need them for then.
That makes sense. That makes sense. But anyway, look, mocking Joe's ongoing purchases and habit. I guess we should probably talk about broader highlights and things that we particularly enjoyed about 2019. So let's start by talking about a release that happened this year within Games Workshop that we were, or you individually, was especially excited about. So I'll start with Phil. hopeful that he is remembering what even came out this year. What release happened in 2019, Phil, that was most exciting for you?
Oh, well, do you know what? I'm one of those people that tends not to buy things that are new and has just come out.
Okay.
I tend to, because obviously I collect Krieg. That's all been around for about 10 years. So there's nothing new on that side of the hobby. In trying to think about stuff that I bought when it's kind of just come out, there's literally been a handful of things. So the Apocalypse boxes, when they came out, I got the
I
Imperial.
completely forgot about Apocalypse. That happened this year, didn't it?
Apocalypse came out. I didn't get Apocalypse, but I did buy 2 of the Apocalypse battle boxes. So one of them was the Space Marines, because even back then we were talking about we're going to probably do a Space Marine project. So I picked that up. So I've built one squad so far of the 3 standard infantry squads that you get out of that. And then the other one was the Knights one, because I was determined to do actually no, it was, God, I'm trying to think when I actually started. I think it was early this year. I was doing my Knights. It was a Knight project, and then later on I got the Knights box, predominantly sort of for the Helverins, but I haven't actually done anything with that box so far. So those 2 purchases were quite good. The other one was the Palatine Enforcers for Necromunda. I picked one of those up to do a conversion with literally 1 model for my Inquisitorial retinue. I think the only other release that got me super excited, and this is probably the big one, is obviously Sisters of Battle. And I say that having not purchased it, because I have too much to build and paint already, as much as I absolutely love the kit and the range. It's like if I was feeling a bit frivolous, I probably would have gone for it, but I sort of knew better and had to restrain myself.
No, that makes sense, mate. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, as a range of things, I think, you pretty much covered off all the basics there, really. I think, Sisters have definitely been an interesting addition, and I think, obviously, the year has kind of built up to the idea that Sisters will be coming out at some point in 2019, and not to say that their inevitable release has been disappointing, because I don't think it has been disappointing, but it certainly... I think, again, it's going to be interesting to see where Sisters kind of end up in the early months of 2020, when the range starts to become more widely featured and more people start, fielding armies of Sisters. But yeah, no, in terms of releases, man, that's a pretty good account of things that you're interested in. I thought you were going to accidentally say that the Vigilus release where you got the special battle cannon was your favourite thing, and I was going to chime in and go, no, Phil, that was 2018. No,
you're right. But I think it was this year where I was saying to you, it's really good, it does flat 3 damage, and you were saying, no, that isn't that much difference from D3. And then I think once we did that doubles game together, you were like, dear God, that is actually quite good.
It's quite handy. It is quite handy for sure.
For sure.
I'll chime in and talk about my kind of favourite releases for the year. I think, in general, probably my favourite release in 2019 was actually the Rise of the Phoenix, or Blood of the Phoenix, or Fire of the Phoenix. I love it so much I can't even remember what it's called. The Elder Rules for the Gathering, not the Gathering Storm, sorry, the
Psychic
Awakening, as well as obviously the addition of new plastic Elder miniatures, which is always something that I deeply love. Jane Czar is an absolutely stunning miniature that obviously is definitely a consideration for almost all Elder Generals moving forwards. But the broad set of rules and extra features that were added to the Elder Army, the Craftworld Elder Army, after the addition of that book, was, in my opinion, a really meaningful and actually quite solid update that has given Elder players options on top of options. And that, taken in conjunction with the chapter-approved points reduction to certain key units, has massively influenced, I think, how people now can look at the Elder army. And I think now more than ever, the Elder, Craftworld Elder, when I say this, are definitely getting back to a place where they're more than just a bunch of flyers. And I think that's really incredible, because I feel like I've really enjoyed flyers in my Elder army, and I think you're always going to have a place in your army for a few Elder flyers. But it's absolutely amazing to be in a situation now where we've really actually got opportunities for things like Aspect Warriors to start to come back into the game. Striking Scorpions, for example, now. I know I talked about this before, but Striking Scorpions are genuinely now at a point where I think you're going to have to really struggle to come up for a reason not to take them, because there's always going to be utility in that Striking Scorpions unit for the price of admission. So now with Chapter Approved, the Striking Scorpion unit is only 90 points for 10. So that's 10 toughness free up armor save, infiltrating models that essentially deep strike, get a load of benefits when they're in cover, can do mortal wounds to people when they charge into them. I mean, yeah, I mean, again, anything on top of anything that made my favourite model, my favourite unit in all of 40k lore better is always going to be a win-win for me. So their new Exarch abilities are cool as well, and the points reductions and everything else that's come into effect has made it interesting. And then all that custom, Craftworld stuff that they've added also really adds some interesting elements. So yeah, for me, I think, adding what's happening there has been interesting. I think the whole Psychic Awakening thing has been quite interesting on the whole as well, although I don't necessarily feel like it's gathered the same sort of momentum that Vigilus did at the start of the year.
No, I think Vigilus, I guess because there was only 2 books, they were a lot more focused around its release, and that it just felt like they did a lot more with it. I mean, they're starting now to do a few more like stories and just little tidbits about it on the Warhammer community website, but nowhere near the same kind of push that they did with Vigilus, where they had like designer commentaries, background Phil Kelly talking about how he made all the maps for Vigilus and stuff like that, which they sort of went really in depth into.
I mean, you say that because it's interesting to hear you say that, because when you go onto Warhammer Community, I feel like they're doing a lot for Psychic Awakening, to the extent that they're even like doing short stories that they're giving away for free. And
well, they're doing some of that, but not a huge amount. And what I find is, if you look at all the posts to do with Psychic Awakening, the majority of them are either rules previews or model previews. They're not necessarily giving you the kind of grander story arc about what is going on in these areas.
I don't know if that's true, mate, because I think if you go on Warhammer Community right now, pinned to the header of the site is the Sanguine, short story, all to do with Blood Angels and Psychic Awakening. And I know they've had these for. I don't know if they did one for Black Templars, but they've definitely done it for other factions within Psychic Awakening. And I also think the problem they've got with Psychic Awakening is like a much longer tail than Vigilus was ever going to be. So they don't want to. Because again, I also feel like they probably got their fingers burned at the start of the year when they did all the Chaos stuff. Do you remember at the start of the year when they introduced the Warp engine?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And do you remember everyone being like, God, could you just stop talking about Chaos Space Marines, please?
Well, yeah. I think Vigilus was like spent. It was always like, Abaddon is coming in 80 days. But we're going to announce Abaddon in 80 days, but he won't actually get released for another 2 weeks afterwards. And we're also going to show off loads and loads of other stuff, but not properly. And it's only going to be available as mainly push-fit kits.
Yeah, and I totally get that. But what I'm saying is that, I think because of some of the backlash from the fans that they had, and it wasn't massive backlash, but it was...
I think what Phil's feeling in this one is that like Vigilus was spread out over is one story about one or two planets spread out over 3-4 months, where Psychic Awakening is going at literally a breakneck speed. Of like the first Psychic Awakening book that went on for about a month, and they showed off Drazar and they showed off
Jane Czar, yeah.
Our Lady Beard, whatever her name is. That went on for a while, and then you had about a good 2 weeks afterwards, and then they announced the next book, like for Faith and Fury, and then once they officially announced Faith and Fury, they were already on about the next one, and then when Faith and Fury went on pre-order, they'd just forgotten about it and were straight on Blood of Baal.
Yeah.
It's like there's no breathing space. You're already talking about the next one and haven't released this one yet.
Yeah, I can see why though, because I think they're trying to get them out all as quick as possible to kind of give every army the same kind of balance and set of powers and special abilities to try and even the playing field a bit in terms of limit the amount of codex creep there is in terms of the duration. So hopefully within the space of, say, 6 months, every army's got something new. It's not like you're waiting a year or 2 years for every army to get a little update to have these effectively custom build your own faction and other bits.
Yeah, I don't know. I understand the criticism of Psychic Awakening, but I do think they have done a pretty good job of it so far. I think the problem is that not everything's been created equally in Psychic Awakening, and this wasn't necessarily the intent of me bringing up Psychic Awakening, because I was genuinely like, oh, actually, I quite like it from an Elder perspective, but at the same time, I think Psychic Awakening is quite clearly the last kind of middle ground before we move into whatever the 9th edition of Warhammer 40,000 is going to end up being. I know that is a mad thing to say with an amount of certainty, but I think it's pretty clear that we are heading into a 9th edition release in 2020, and that these events and these rules are being done to experiment with new ideas, but ultimately throw out a load of stuff that, like in Age of Sigmar 2, they can start, releasing the Warhammer 40,000 Book 2 versions of codexes and start refining and, delivering a more balanced version of all this stuff they're adding in at the moment. Potentially. I mean, who knows, really? I mean, again, it's all hyperbole on my part. But, Joe, what was your highlight release of the year? What did you like most of all the things that came out?
It's got to be, for me, is all the Chaos stuff.
Chaos Knights?
Chaos Knights are beautiful, but I also think that was a con, and I hate Games Workshop for it.
You hate them for it? My goodness.
Hate is a strong word.
It's a very strong word.
Miffed at worst, kind of thing.
Okay. You miffed at Games Workshop makes more sense.
In advance, what you could do with Chaos Knights and how great they were and what you can arm them with. And then in the box, you got the chainsword, a fist, and the worst gun you can arm them with. And that is all.
The laser destroyer?
The laser destroyer, the D3 shot, D3 damage gun or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually called a laser destroyer. I just threw that out there.
But it's just garbage, is what it is.
So where's all the other guns and stuff, or are you meant to convert them?
If you want to do it the proper Games Workshop way, right? No second-hand retailers, no bit shops, nothing. If you want to get a Chaos Knight with 2 Gatling cannons, you have to buy him and 2 Knight Preceptors.
Well,
yeah,
but you could make 3 Chaos Knights out of all of that.
Well, you could have 1 Chaos Knight model and then 2 other knights which you could paint to look chaosy.
Yeah. Which they've totally said is fine.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's even referenced in the Chaos Knight Codex. It basically says just, paint it so it's all the same, and you can use Imperial Knight models as
I
Chaos
want my
Knights.
Chaos Knights to look like Chaos Knight. You see the new one.
Ah, yeah, but there are different stages of Chaos Knights. There's they may have just turned that morning.
Just they woke up and they were just like, sod it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it happens some way, doesn't it? I mean, not all of it's as glamorous as,
Yeah.
a long series of events that leads to their downfall. Sometimes you might just wake up and go, reckon I'll give that Chaos stuff a go today.
Yeah. But yeah, but that aside, the model is beautiful, and I'm happy that Chaos Knights have got something outside of Forge World.
Mm.
I'm just slightly annoyed about if I wanted to have one knight, I have to spend nearly £300 to make it look how I want it to look.
So they not have the weapon sprue as a sort of sold separately.
No.
No, it's a
Yeah,
pain.
that would have
though.
been a very nice decision for them to take, but it's
Yeah.
not one that they've done.
What it's all about is that Abaddon model.
Mm.
Because
Well, that is pretty stunning.
is he beautiful? And I got one I painted at the moment it came out, and then I sold it with the rest of my army, but I'm actually quite tempted to buy and paint another one because he is just so nice. He's a beautiful model. And then all the new accompanying marine stuff, like the new Terminators, like they've been ever so slightly changed, but they look 100 times better.
Mm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the new Chaos Space Marines, they're taller, they look more dynamic, they're just so much better. The only downside is that they're not fully multi-part kits, and they're not customizable, because like you can only build the models in a specific way.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is what arms you can give them and what heads. But that's fine. I can live with that. Well, so the new obliterators, the two new obliterators are awesome. I don't understand why they didn't make it a 3-man squad, because that's what you run it.
Did they not amend it to a 2-man squad though, for the purposes of those rules?
The minimum requirement for a squad is 1,
Oh, okay,
and the maximum is 3.
gotcha.
So if you run 6 of them in your army, you have 3 in one pose and 3 in another pose.
Gotcha.
I was like, why didn't they just make it 3 and just not do it?
Have they released them though properly, or they just because are they like kind of push for easy build, or they?
Yeah, they basically the Chaos half of Shadow Spear has now been released as
to start collecting.
Start a collecting book set, which is brilliant, because in terms of value compared to the other start collecting boxes, it's incredible.
Mm.
You get the Master of Possession, so you get a really cool HQ choice. You get 2 Greater Possessed, which they're not arguably great, but like in the vacuum, they are incredibly powerful for just 2, because they're just 2 characters that go around mashing stuff. A 10-man squad of Space Marines, 2 Obliterators, and a Venom Crawler, the Demon Engine model.
Mm. The Spider-Man.
The Spider, and that thing is actually really, really good.
Mm.
So for what you get out of it, it's great. They're all new builds and they look great. That new Sorcerer model that came out 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, he got previewed in the Chaos engine, the rumor engine that you mentioned ages ago.
Yeah, so like in terms of like everyone's saying, oh, Chaos, like Space Marines have had loads this year with the new Primera stuff. Chaos have had just a crazy good revamp. All they need to do now is redo Noise Marines and Berserkers, and their whole line is done basically.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's definitely fair to say that Chaos have really flourished this year with releases. I'm still not a fan of old Tim the Sorcerer, the Master of Possessions, but and I've seen a few of them since in reality, and they definitely look better than they look photographed. But I'm still not a fan of that model. But other than him, I think the rest of the Chaos Space Marine range has been pretty incredible.
And talking about like Vigilus, like Chaos were the real winners from the Vigilus campaign because all of they've got 5 or 6 detachments, and all good. They're all usable. But what was always surprising me is I go talk to people how great they are, and they're like, "I didn't even know there were detachments in there," and I'm like, "You are missing out."
Get yourself that Vigilus Defiant, mate. It's where it's at.
Now Night Lords have had that boost. That Host Raptoral is incredible for them. They're having a unit of Raptors that are now only 190 points for 10 that can deep strike, charge 3d6 inches without being overwatched with +2 to their charge. Is incredible. And for 1 CP, they get to reroll all of their hits as part of that attachment. Super good. The Cult of Destruction one, where you get to for 1 CP at the start of the game, 1 Havoc squad or 1 Obliterator squad can shoot after your opponent has made his first move, or after his first movement phase. So he gets all cushy, old Mr. Raven Guard player. He's like, boom, have 5 Centurions, and your Obliterators go, boom, you're all dead.
I'll tell you another model that I've not seen too much of. If you're looking at getting back into Chaos, Joe, why aren't you talking about the Master of Executions?
All right. He is really, really good for Emperor's Children armies because he whacks out a lot of attacks at high damage, and because he's doing that, he really benefits from their mortal wound stratagem. So he's something to be looked at. You don't see him enough.
I've literally never seen him.
You've never seen him?
Not in a game, no.
Maybe I should chuck him into my army for the lols.
I think you should, man. He's an amazing miniature with amazing rules. And yeah, I was just looking at the Chaos Space Marine kit, actually, when you said that it's relatively uncustomizable. I'm not entirely sure that's an accurate statement, mate. I'm looking at it here. It's got quite a lot of flexibilities and options to it at a glance.
The only thing what annoys me, what you can't change, is you can't change the torsos on them.
Okay.
So the legs and the torsos are always going to be the same, however you build.
Oh, I see. It's one of those situations, like the Primaris Marines.
Yeah, so they're locked in that one facing position. And then, unlike on normal Space Marines, where you've got one right arm cocked at like a right angle holding the gun, and then a random left arm which has got like a grip pose in it, so it slots over the front of the bolter. In the Marine kit, it's basically this one specific arm goes with this one specific bolter with this one specific left arm. And if you get those wrong, it doesn't line up. Gotcha.
The other thing that's super interesting when you look at these sprues, because again, I've not assembled any of these, they've given them the new Primaris backpack joint.
Yeah, the square one.
Yeah, they've got rid of the old circles. They've gone for Primaris style marine backpacks. Not actual backpacks, but the thing they stick onto.
What I would like to have seen, like they did for the Marine release, implements, was shoulder pads.
Yeah.
Like I would love to have seen shoulder pads for the main Chaos Legions with a 10 shoulder pad and 10 normal. That would have been lovely.
Yeah, that would have been really cool. It still could happen though, man.
Yeah, it can still happen, but in terms of releases, like Chaos for me are a big winner for this year. And
are you going to pick up the Noctilith crown?
I had it. I opened the box, and then I was like, I don't want to paint this. I took one look at it, and I was like, this is not for me.
No, not a big old massive Chaos symbol.
No, but I was sat at work looking at it the other day, and I was like, oh, I could turn it into a cool piece of scenery,
Mm.
or like get the hobby saw and just cut it up into loads and loads of pieces, have it like a broken Stargate.
Mm.
But yeah,
I
I'm
can't
happy.
remember what it does in game. I seem to remember it had some sort of psychic thing to it, didn't it?
It boosts. Oh,
Yeah.
my codex is downstairs, but it boosts your psychic abilities, and it gives everyone. So it each turn the bubble increases of invulnerable save.
Mm.
So for someone, actually, it might be worth looking at my army because I might put some word bearers in.
Mm.
Thing. So if that's on the table, it'd be quite useful.
There you go.
Mm.
Things to think about, Joe.
Did
But it is
we?
a building keyword, and a lot of people are playing Imperial Fists.
Yeah, for now. That'll get old soon.
Didn't the Webway Gate come out this year?
No, the Webway Gate came out
Was
last
that
year.
last year? Because I
Yeah.
remember when that came out, it was a bit of a, oh, this is something new and exciting and a sort of new direction for 40k. But again, I've never seen it. And I remember when it came out, the rules were pretty tasty and everyone was like, oh, this will be really competitive. And then you've never seen one ever.
No, because you're remembering it wrong, Phil. What happened was the rules came out and went, no, that's useless. Move on.
Yeah, it does. It does everything that your stratagems do for Deep Strike, but you have to pay points for it, and it's locked in one position.
Yeah,
Oh, fair enough.
it's bonk. If you could deep strike it and then deep strike stuff out of it, great.
Like a monster.
Yeah, well, because what's interesting is in Age of Sigma, pretty much everyone takes a piece of terrain because they're free and they normally have quite a good buffing ability to your army.
They're not
and then
free
they-
in Age of Sigma.
Yeah, they don't cost anything.
Are you
from
sure?
What I gather, yeah. Well, from the when I mentioned it and I've spoken to people about it, they've said yeah, it doesn't cost anything.
Huh?
So it's like, why wouldn't you take it?
Mm.
I mean, I could be completely wrong because I've not checked it myself, but I've spoken to people and they could be wrong.
There you go.
Assuming they're not, then they are. But that's sort of why you see them a lot in Age of Sigma. Whereas, because I think some of the first ones were like the Knight kind of mechanical repair dock thing that was, if you didn't shoot for a turn, you could shoot at your max for the following turn, and it was like, why not just shoot for 2 turns? And it's like the rules for them are never good, and it seems a bit disappointing to create such a cool model and then to never see them get used.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. I think
The tree, the Nurgle tree, you saw quite a lot at the start of it.
Yes, yeah, because that was crazy powerful.
Yeah.
very good. So yeah, okay, cool. Well, that's a pretty, comprehensive appraisal of the releases that we liked. Why don't we now attempt to talk about some personal hobby highlights? I'm going to steal the thunder and go first, sort of set the tone for things that are to come. So, for me this year, actually, bizarrely, one of my most enjoyable, funny little hobby highlights was probably, as mad as it sounds, was the doubles weekend where me, Phil, Richie, and Joe's avatar went to Warhammer World and played in 40k doubles. I mean, obviously, it was a terrible shame that Joe was unable to join us. But I was really proud of our achievement that weekend, Phil, going undefeated with a combination of Krieg and Blood Angels before, the new Blood Angel rules came into effect. Slightly miffed that we didn't podium, given the fact that it was a one of those glorious Throne of Skulls events. But I had a really good weekend, and I thought it was actually a really good demonstration of some interesting army synergies and some interesting ideas. And also, I think as well, what I enjoyed about it, because I've never done a doubles weekend with Phil ever prior to this. It was quite interesting, kind of, partnering up with Phil and sort of imparting some of my general tactical nonsense onto him. And it had a nice kind of mentoring vibe to it at times. Not that Phil didn't know what he was doing to some extent, but we had a a lot of really interesting tactical moments, and I think the army synergised really nicely, and it was just a fun weekend. So, yeah, I mean, bizarrely, from a personal highlight perspective, that was definitely one of them. I mean, how did you feel about that one, Phil? Was it a good one for you?
No, it was. I really enjoyed it. It was a good fun weekend, and it was something we've always talked about. Oh, we should pair up this time.
Yeah.
But normally someone drops out, or we've got to pair up with someone else for whatever reason. So it was nice to finally do it.
Yeah.
And you're right. It was fun. It was a fun time winning every single game, because normally I get to 3 games in, and I normally win 3 games total. So to win the first 3 in a row is like, oh, we're going up in the world.
Yep.
And then to win the 4th one was like, oh, this is getting serious now, Dan. And then to win the 5th one, we're like, oh, we bloody done it. And then we still came 10th or something ridiculous.
I think we were 8th in the end, which was crazy because we were actually the only team to win all 5 games.
Yes, but I guess because of that, that's why we didn't get as many favourite game votes.
It's true.
I do think Captain Smash upset a few people that weekend, so I'm not too surprised.
Yeah, he is a bit of he's an upsetting character, to be sure. I using the Blood Angels that weekend, I've not seen my Blood Angels Codex, or even I think the models that I used that weekend since there. I don't know what the heck I've done with them. They're gone somewhere. I'll hopefully find them soon, because I've not really actually stopped to think about looking for them. But yeah, I've definitely lost the Blood Angels Codex and the stratagem cards and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I probably need to find out where all that went. But yeah, I mean, poor show for Joe, though, right? I mean, it was a shame Joe couldn't make it. Why couldn't you come in the end, Joe? I can't even remember now.
I think I had to do some family thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'd been forced into.
Yeah, I think if we all recollect, it was a really weak excuse and we didn't believe you.
If you think that I would prefer to have been at a family event than being at Warhammer World, then you are mad.
Indeed, you are sorely mistaken.
No, that's true.
If you walked into my house and said, "Joe, come with me. Stop sitting there on the sofa watching telly and come to Warhammer World." If I ever turn around and be like, "No, I'm enjoying myself too much,"
Yeah.
shoot me in the face.
In the face.
Because you're an imposter and not the real Joe, that must be it.
That's it. But no, I mean, genuinely, that was really cool. And then obviously, Grand Tournament Heat 2, I had a lot of lofty ideas about Heat 2 going into it. I'd done a lot of, theory crafting on the sort of army that I wanted to bring. And obviously, I had a couple of losses in that one, but still qualifying for the finals was definitely a highlight for me as well, because it continued my streak of 1 Grand Tournament Heat and then qualifying. So, this is the 3rd year in a row where I've been able to qualify for the GT finals. And as everyone who frequently listens to this podcast hopefully already understands, we quite like the Grand Tournament events that Warhammer World runs. So it was really cool to be able to make it through, and extra cool because last year I was the only guy who made it through. But the fact that me, Phil and Joe all made it through this year is super exciting. I'm really looking forward to the weekend of the finals, even if it is going to be a grueling weekend of gaming. I think it's going to be a real laugh. So yeah, that was also a hobby highlight for me. And also I got I think 3 favourite army votes in that Grand Tournament Heat, which is an accolade that I never normally receive, because my armies are usually painted really, really badly. Unless, of course, they've been painted by Joe, obviously. But yeah, no, my own army that I painted by myself got 3 favourite army votes. So yeah, thumbs up all round. So yeah, what do you guys reckon of all that?
It's good that you got rewarded for your effort, because your elder normally is just sort of passable and kind of normal, but now they're actually really nice to look at. So it's like, well done for getting it done, and hopefully you'll be a bit more encouraged to put that kind of top shelf effort in a bit more often.
That's
that makes sense.
That's it.
It always surprises me when I realise that you can paint
Thanks,
Because,
Joe.
no, because like you once showed you. I remember a few years back, you were like, "I'm going to do a Crimson Fist army." You said to me, and you showed me your test model, and I was like blown away by it. I was like, "This is actually like incredible." And then you're like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take my time." And then you're like, "We're doing a tournament in a month's time. I'm going to paint my entire army of Crimson Fist in a month." And then you were like, bare effort is going into this.
Yeah.
They will be painted, probably not washed, and they might have red hands. And that was like the last time. But with the Eldar, you were like, "Oh, I'm going to base these properly," and you kind of explored avenues of like color contrast and theory and stuff to have like the coolest bases and stuff. It was really good. And I'm super happy that you qualified. I remember sitting next to you when they were calling the names out, and you were holding your breath for quite a long period of time.
It's true. It's weird how much it meant to me. Which is I'm not afraid or ashamed to admit it. It definitely meant more to me than I thought it would have done. But no, I came 25th, which is probably the worst performance I've ever had in a GT heat. But it's still qualified, so yay!
Win.
But there you go. Those are my hobby highlights. They're mostly gaming related, but look, I did paint some stuff this year. Not as much as I ever set out to do, but lots of consistent hobby. In a way, this podcast is more my expression of the hobby now than painting and gaming. Not that I don't do plenty of each, but I think. Yeah, I'm also obviously very proud of this podcast. Obviously, I think I'm always really happy with the way that people respond to it, and again, I'm always really proud to be able to tell people that we're working on this project and that we've all stuck to it. Barring a few little no-shows here and there, we've always achieved our desired release schedule. We've always come out on time. It's required a lot of effort on my part this year to do that, and I'm not saying it didn't require effort on your guys' parts as well, but yeah, there's been a lot of times where I've been up till 4 a.m, 5 a.m, rendering and uploading and editing stuff to ensure that it goes out at 8 a.m. UK time on every other Saturday. And I'm glad we did what we set out to achieve. We always said we'd do it for a year, or we always said in 2019 that we would commit to this. And although we've not had the discussion about our plans for 2020, I think most of us are aligned that we still want to try and continue with this commitment for at least another year. I think this year's been a good one, and I think we'll carry on for a while longer yet.
Oh, definitely.
There you go. Didn't want to put you on the spot, lads. We'll talk about that off air, so to speak. But yeah, Joe, what have your hobby highlights been of 2019?
I need to do a count up, but I think I managed to hit my target of 365 models this year.
Wow.
One a day.
That was helped along by on the side painting an American Airborne and a Waffen SS army for bolt action. I think that kind of helped me along a bit. That was quite good. And I probably did the maximum amount of armies ever done in the year this year as well. And the fact that I've actually got 2 fully painted armies that I still own, which if I wanted to could call done, which is rare for most hobbyists, I think. Like if I wanted to now, I've got a few Dark Eldar models and I've got a few Marine armies models in my house. But I could, if those spontaneously combusted into dust, I'd be like, it's cool. I've got everything I actually need to run these armies. And I think that's a really good position for any hobbyist to be in. And then my other one, my hobby achievement, is just becoming the best in our group as well. the one that everyone looks up to and adores.
That's true.
Praise the mighty one.
Yeah,
How many tournament wins did you get this year, Joe?
you know, none. But I placed the highest cumulatively over events out of all of us. And you only won that tournament. I came second in because I invited you the day before. Had I have not, I would have won that tournament.
Yeah, but what about the 3 others that I won?
You didn't win any other ones, did you?
Yeah, I won the one in Durrington.
Oh, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
That's
but
nothing.
you were there. There were some good players there, to be fair.
Yeah, but I came the highest in the GT. I qualified at the GT. Hang on, if we just class from the GT to now, I'm the best. Before then, doesn't count.
Okay, fair enough. So
No,
we're not including the various months that took place between, when was the Grand Tournament Heat 2? It was in August, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we're discounting 8 months of the year. So,
Yep.
so if we only take a third of the entire year, you were the better player.
Yep.
Fair enough. Fair
Okay.
enough. Bearing in mind that you're running Space Marines and I'm running Eldon.
You ran the best army in the game for like 2 years now. It's my moment in the sun.
All right, I'll give it to you, Joe. I may sound petty and ridiculous, but no, you've stepped up your game massively, mate. It's been, and most of it's just been because you've actually started taking army lists that are relatively competitive, which is a good change.
Yeah, in all seriousness, I'm super chuffed that I managed to not only qualify for the GT, but also came top 10 in the 10, obviously, in the top 10 at that tournament, having never ever really reached the top half at a Warhammer World event for singles. So I was super chuffed about that. So to almost podium was good for me, and the fact that I did it with Dark Eldar and Harlequins was also good. That made me happy.
Yeah, no, totally. Mate.
They were two pretty. They were both very good, but they weren't like hyper powerful armies, well, which I quite enjoyed doing. I'm just a little bit sad that I can't legitimately take either of those armies to the final because Space Marines exist at the moment.
It is a problem, isn't it? And the added problem is the Warhammer World terrain scenario.
Yeah, if there was intervening walls, it'd be all right. But most Warhammer World tables are barren at best. Like there might be one or two buildings if you're lucky. The rest of the terrain is normally trees or the odd pile of crates, and that's it.
I'm surprised because they've had about a good year or so now since the Sector Imperialis terrain's been out. I'm surprised they haven't done more to update the terrain there, just to reflect the range that they currently sell, because all the woods there are the old woods, which they don't sell anymore. The majority, in fact, all the buildings there are using the old Imperial Ruin, or whatever they were called, Imperial Ruins kind of kits.
Cities of Death.
Cities of Death, that was it, yeah. So with the exception of the odd Bastion, or maybe Skyshield Landing Pad, or the Mechanicus, Sector Mechanicus stuff they've got there. So they did make a small addition to have some of those, but it's such a small amount in comparison to now.
The problem with the Sector Mechanicus terrain is there's about 4 foot underneath the catwalks where there's nothing. It doesn't. So that terrain, although it exists on a plane of existence on that table, it doesn't actually do anything for the game in terms of covering your model.
Well, it can give you a cover save if you're on it, but it doesn't get block line of sight in any way. Yeah, you're right there. It's not very good for that reason.
But there you go. Any other hobby highlights, Joe?
I don't know, I can't think of any.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, but no, it's all good. Yeah, being now the best and painting many armies. It's all good.
Good times. How about you, Phil? What was your number one accomplishment in all of 2019?
Oh, do you know that's a hard one? At the beginning of the year, I did come up with a sort of hobby resolution, and I wrote down a few things that I wanted to do this year. And there's a thing. It was like a thing on Instagram, like hashtag hobby resolution 2019. So I came up with a list of things that I wanted to do, and out of those things, I pretty much did none of them. So.
So sorry, this is what you're most proud of, is it? That
No,
you did
nothing.
This
is a bit of backstory because I ended up getting distracted about stuff that I was probably more proud of. So originally, I was going to finish off my Tyranids army that I started a couple of years ago and haven't really touched since. And then I was going to do my Knights, and I wasn't going to do any Krieg, which, to be fair, I haven't actually done any this year because I've been doing other stuff. I was going to do my Kill Team, which I didn't do. I was going to do more videos for my Beyond the Tabletop channel, which I did up until
Did you paint a bunch of Lehman Russes for your Krieg?
He added maps to them.
Well, I did a few things. So I did some weapons. So I made the coaxial kind of Conqueror style turret weapon for them, and I painted up my tank commander. It was last year, I think. But actually, what I did do is I sort of went back and I touched up a load of them and added on. So quite more recently, I did loads of mud effects on all the tracks. So yeah, I've gone back over some stuff of my Krieg and sort of tidied them up.
Yeah,
things like that. But I haven't specifically painted any new units. I mean, like specifically Krieg ones, as far as I'm aware. Because basically this year was all predominantly sort of focused around No Retreat to an extent, and that was one of the armies I sort of submitted to No Retreat 8s as like one of my armies to do, but I ended up getting in on my Krieg army. But the thing I wanted to do new for my Krieg to make it a little bit more competitive and more thematic was to do my Assassins. So I started converting and painting them up, which I'm super happy with. And then it was onto my Inquisition, which sort of took up the vast majority of time, I think, this year. So I built my Inquisitor, Lady Eleanor Greyhorn, which I'm really happy with because it's like, it's not a simple conversion, but it's not overly complex either. And you know, the paint job was a bit more time consuming than paint to do. The Demon Host, Esosas, he's probably the most complex conversion I've ever done. And he was like quite a big model as well. So I was super chuffed with him. And then I did a couple of like little retinue models as well. And each one was converted up in some way. So overall, that was like a really nice addition to my army because it gives a... Oh, and I also did all the Crusaders as well, which I think I'd actually built last year but only painted this year. So in terms of the model I'm most proud of doing this year, then it'd be my Inquisitor, because I think she's like a really nice model and is like a nice visual centerpiece now for my army. And in terms of sort of hobby highlights, I think in terms of events, is obviously I really enjoyed going. I was really pleased to go on like Winter's SEO channel, obviously following in the footsteps of Joe. So getting to play him was really cool. And then like about a month later, going to No Retreat was probably the highlight of the year, because that was really fun sort of retreat time. Getting to meet Toke, our regular listener, was also really cool because he's a really sound guy. And my game with him was probably like my game of the year because it was crazy good fun and went on till like 3 a.m. or something ridiculous. So yeah, going to that event, you know, I've always said it's a fantastic event to go to. Applications are currently open until sometime in January, I think, like the 12th or something. So if anyone does want to or is interested to, they should definitely check it out. And hopefully you guys are going to apply to it.
I'm going to apply. I'm going to apply with my Dark Eldar and my Lions. and then I'll throw in a few test models for my Alpha Legion, and
Cool.
see if I can get in on one of those armies.
Yeah. What about you?
I don't know just yet. I will try and see how. I mean, again, we're approaching the Christmas holidays now, so it's going to be. I'm going to be very much pedal to the floor with whatever I decide my Grand Tournament Finals army is going to be. That's something of a soul-searching dilemma that I'm dealing with at the moment, because, as I kind of stated already, there's quite clearly quite a lot of open terrain, and Marines are crazy strong in that environment. So I've got quite a lot of Marine stuff, so I may just end up joining, getting on the bandwagon, as it were. But yeah, we'll see how all that goes and where I end up and what I can kind of offer. I think the problem is if I applied to the no retreat stuff, it would. Their application process seems to be predicated on the notion that you're pitching an army that you've already painted and own. They don't seem too interested in promises of, potential future glories.
Do you know what? I don't think that's true, but I think you do need to have painted up a couple of units at least to go. Because, like, for example, the Tyranid army that I applied with, I only painted up one unit, and Pardo did say to me, like, okay, what's the chance of you getting that done in time? And I was like, I have to be honest, kind of slim. So ideally I'd take my Krieg, but if I could only get in on my Tyranids, then I would obviously prioritise that for the year, sort of thing. So I think if I was like, oh yeah, I could do it, then maybe he would have been like, yeah, we'll put you down as a Tyranid player, sort of thing. And they do like to see progress shots throughout the year of you doing your army and stuff. So if you've already pre-built it and you've got nothing to do, like, they wouldn't be doing that. So the assumption is you're always going to be doing something for your army. They're not necessarily expecting you to do a whole army from scratch, though, because I do think they want to see a couple of units finished to, like, the standard that you're going to be bringing them to the event.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have a look at my Elder collection and pitch based on that stuff and see how it gets on. I am what I am, and the quality of my paint jobs are what they are. If I do not meet the necessary criteria, then I will simply accept that and move on with my life. But I'll chuck an application in for the sake of argument.
I mean, you can always apply with some of Joe's armies that you own.
Nah, I'm not really interested in that. Not that I'm saying that Joe's armies aren't to a good standard. Obviously they are, but I don't think that's the spirit of the endeavour. I think if you're just turning up with commission stuff, it's not really what the thing is all about, is it?
Well, people do go with commissioned armies. So
of course.
I think that's necessarily an issue. But yeah, considering it is meant to be a may the hobby be the winner sort of attitude, going with an army that you didn't paint yourself is a bit of an odd one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, there you go. So, cool. All right, well, there you go. That's 2019 in a nutshell, guys. Obviously, lots and lots of different things happened and took place. Obviously, again, we've already kind of said it, but thanks very much for all of you discovering and, sticking with us throughout 2019. For all you guys who are listening for us the first time, obviously, welcome as well. It's always cool to get new people in, but obviously as well, the people who've been there throughout, that's super cool. As we kind of alluded to, our aspirations and expectations are that we'll continue doing this for the foreseeable future. It is quite a time sink and quite a demand on all of our time, but we really enjoy putting this stuff together and having the opportunity to discuss and express our love of the hobby with the wider community. And yeah, I'm kind of speaking on the behalf of everyone when I say this stuff, but obviously thank you very much for sticking with us and supporting us and enjoying what we have to offer, because it's not to say that we wouldn't be doing this if less of you were listening, but at the same time it's super cool that those of you who are listening are seemingly enjoying it, and all the people that have reached out to us on social media and I've had conversations with. I mean, it's been absolutely awesome to, connect with so many people throughout the span of the year. I don't want to name specific names at this point because I'll inevitably forget some people and then it will seem like favoritism. But yeah, to everyone that I've conducted conversations with over social media throughout the course of 2019, thanks very much. It was really nice that you said nice stuff. And for those of you who just listen and don't say anything, cheers as well. That's all perfectly lovely. Anything you guys want to elaborate on there? Is that feeling about the nicest sort of amount of yay, thank you for this bit?
Yeah, it's always good to know that people actually care about what we have to say, because a lot of the time I hear people telling me to my face that I need to shut up and get on with my job.
Yep.
So, so having people enjoy listening to me talk about stuff that I talk to you about anyway is good. And thank you for being my silent therapists and helping me work through my plastic crack addiction. And also thank you to Phil for putting up with me and Dan and our pointless segues.
Of which there has been many over the course.
Well, indeed. Although this one hopefully isn't one of them. But yeah, there you go. Yes. Thank you, Phil, for your tolerance throughout all the things.
You're more than welcome.
Well, exactly. Although, if I can say one thing, I would appreciate it if you start giving me artwork earlier. That would be a winner.
That's fair enough. Well, the only problem is I'll give you the artwork once we've finished the last recording, because we don't really know what we're always doing beforehand, if that makes sense.
That's true. We don't need to have this conversation amongst the people, Phil. Let's leave it there. But yeah, and as a thing, we've said it multiple times already throughout the podcast. It will have definitely happened during the intro and so on. But, obviously, this is the last podcast of 2019. But there will be this Christmas quiz. We haven't exactly decided what to call it. Current titles are either the end of the year quiz or the big fat 40k quiz of the year. But regardless, whatever it ends up being called, that is due to drop before the year is over. And then we'll endeavour to stick to our regular schedule and have a podcast ready for you again on January the 4th, 2020. But yeah, look, with that all said, guys, we're going to transition now to the next segment of the show, whatever that may be. Thanks very much. Woo! Welcome back, everyone. We're now going to be talking about the Eternal War Maelstrom missions. We don't necessarily feel like Maelstrom has had a lot of love in the pantheon of Warhammer 40,000 over the years. I think a lot of people have a lot of understandable concerns and complaints about how Maelstrom has worked in the past. But we here are somewhat of the consensus that Maelstrom is actually now, as of Chapter Approved 2019, one of the more interesting ways to play Warhammer 40,000. And we're going to try and explain why. So joining me today, we have Rich. Hello, Rich.
Hello.
A rare and wonderful treat. What have you been up to, buddy? How's life treating you? How's the hobby going?
The hobby's going well. I'm getting ready on my Red Scorpion slowly but surely.
Good times.
Working on those. I at the last minute decided, you know what, I'm going to try and get into the Sisters of Battle. Turns out the last minute was not the best time to try and do that. But I have successfully... I always want to get like an army of Seraphim because I thought that would be cool. And I've got a whole bunch of Seraphim units from some... I didn't pay over the odds. I'm quite glad about that. I managed to get some good deals on the old eBay. The only drawback I've had is that it's now Celestine is sold out, so I haven't got Celestine. So I was looking forward to having like Celestine and a bunch of Seraphim as a special separate battalion, and I can't complete it because you can't get Celestine right now.
She'll come back in stock after Christmas, buddy.
Probably, yeah.
Again, the Sisters range is about to, come on strong in the new year, so, you'll get it all eventually. It's, just a weird launch at the moment. Lots of people with a box of Sisters that doesn't necessarily form any meaningful detachment or army, but what can you do?
And I'm never going to get those miracle dice now. I'm a little bit bummed by that.
That is potentially terrible. If you would like, because I did get the box set. Check me out, Big and Clever. You're quite welcome to make me an offer on those.
I'll trade you some of my Tabletop Tactics cherry red dice.
Oh, the ones that only roll sixes.
Yes, those ones that only roll sixes.
Crikey, well that's a compelling opportunity. I may well take you up on that. But there you go. So Richard's with us. Good times. And then, as always, not to, dampen your enthusiasm for him being here, but Phil's here as well. Hey, Phil.
Oh, hey, yep.
Hey up. There you go. We don't probably need to do the whole where you been, Phil, because you're always here, aren't you?
Oh, I think we did it earlier in the podcast.
I would imagine so. We haven't recorded that bit yet, but I'm assuming it will have occurred. But there we go. You're a good boy, Phil. You're always here. You're my good boy.
No, I'll try my best.
Absolutely. And you succeed with, poise and grace. Anyway, right. This here Maelstrom stuff. So, what has the general consensus been towards Maelstrom in the past? What have we thought about that system? I mean, Phil, have you historically been a fan of Maelstrom?
Yeah, overall, I think I have. I mean, sometimes it can be a bit hit and miss, and it's a bit down to the luck of the draw, quite literally. Yeah. And also sometimes the dice rolls when it comes to rolling for those, D3 victory points. So when I've done events like No Retreat, for example, so they use a mixture of Maelstrom and Eternal War missions, they always set it. So if it's D3 victory points, it's a flat 2.
Yeah.
And if it's D6 victory points, which is quite rare, then it's 3 victory points. So actually that reduces the randomness of maybe just winning on a dice roll because you happen to roll a 3 and your opponent always rolls like a 1, for example. So that sort of evening that out I quite like because it just reduces some of that random probability.
Yeah, no, big time. I think,
but it's a good fun mission because you're doing something new every turn, basically, which is what I like about it.
Yeah. I think it's probably worth pointing out for those of you who, for whatever reason, don't know what we're talking about from the outset. So, historically, Maelstrom is a card-based, or if you don't purchase the cards, the Maelstrom victory point card tactical objective thingies are usually located in the back of your codex. And essentially, historically, it was you play with a complete deck of cards as per your codex, essentially, although as per a combination of the rule book and the codex, it got a bit kind of cumbersome, I suppose, but obviously the best way, and probably the recommended way of playing Maelstrom is to own these cards, but yeah, essentially you'd be playing with, I mean, how many cards are there typically? 60 cards, 50 cards, something like that? Maybe even less, 40? I don't know.
There are 36 cards.
They are rich with the numbers.
Yeah, and they are most common. I mean, for me, they are the things that pad out that little box you get, which has got your stratagem cards in it.
Yeah, that has been the historical experience. But yeah, you play the cards, and then you have to achieve the criteria outlined within the cards. And it's fair to say, Rich, when you had 36 cards, and you were drawing 1, maybe 2 turns, there were quite frequently occurrences where the cards might not have been on your side. I mean, is that a reasonable assertion?
I wasn't a fan of them, really. They had lots of different types of missions that you could do, and it's all about getting loads of cards out. You could change what you had to do on the fly, which seemed interesting, but it all just felt completely random. Like you'd be playing a game and halfway through it's like, well, I've just drawn the wrong cards, unfortunately, so I guess I've lost. There's a few of the older missions where you could just completely snowball and lose, or snowball and win after like the first turn, and it was just too random, and I've not been a fan of it really. And I was always hoping. I remember before it came out, I was hoping that they'd add some more kind of deck building elements to it because I think that could have been fun.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think my perspective on Maelstrom historically has been that it's definitely a more casual format, But even then, I mean, last time I played Maelstrom of the old version was when me and Tim were doing some playtesting, getting together and doing some gaming. And we had a Raven Guard versus Dark Angels game where Tim quite successfully murdered most things in my army, being that he was using, you know, Space Marines and I was using Dark Angels, which, although they are Space Marines, are still not as good as their regular Space Marine cousins, or even the Blood Angels for that matter. Just us and the Space Wolves for the moment, left out in the cold, which is not a pun about the Space Wolves' homeworld of Fenris. Nonetheless, the scenario I found was that, yeah, by all accounts, Tim should have won that game because his army outplayed me in every way, but unfortunately for Tim, he got really mucked around by the cards, and I just got lots of very good cards that allowed me to just steamroller him, even though that, yeah, by the end of the game, I was limping and most of his army was, you know, relatively unscathed. So that's been my experience of Maelstrom in the broad sense. Every time I've played it, there's always been a kind of feast and famine scenario. It never necessarily feels like you've had a close, fun, tactical game of Maelstrom. It always just seems, well, you got lucky or I got lucky. You know, that's the way it goes. And I think what Chapter Approved 2019 is doing, and what I really applaud about the new Maelstrom rules, which we're about to talk about, is I actually think this is probably one of the most tactically deep and interesting ways that you're going to be able to play 40k moving forwards, because there's so many layers to what they've delivered with Maelstrom that I genuinely feel like this will be the way that I will prefer to play the game, at least in a, you know, casual, friendly setting for the foreseeable. I mean, again, without kind of precursoring the whole thing, what's your opinions before we start getting into it? Are you feeling optimistic about what they've done?
I'm feeling really optimistic. I remember flicking through it when we got the new chapter approved. I went through the Eternal War missions, as you do, to see what the next big tournament's going to be like. And I thought I'll just flick through the Maelstrom, as you know, give it a once over. And I was amazed by how I was just genuinely really, really impressed by what was going on there. Phil gave a heads up, because I remember, Phil, you said they did a mission in White Dwarf that was quite interesting, so that might even be why I bothered reading it. But I was really, really impressed really excited by what I read.
Mm.
Yeah, so as Richard said, it was originally like the initial change to how you play, not necessarily the mission itself, but what's called the schemes of war, which is how you go about constructing your deck, and the overall rules of Maelstrom were originally published in White Dwarf, so they've been around for a few months now, and even though they've been out that long, we've still not managed to get a game in of it. But it's good that it's in here and now accompanying a bunch of actual missions as well. So, yeah, I think it will be really good to play. I'm definitely keen to give it a go. And I think it will work out, I think it will work out as a really fun way of playing the game.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. So, to talk about those schemes of war, first of all, from the outset, a new change is you are now able to construct your objective deck. So, before playing one of the following Maelstrom of War missions, after your opponent has shared their army rosters with you, this is very, very thorough language, sorry, you must construct an objective deck. So the logic here is that you don't just turn up with one, you must construct it in front of your opponent. The deck should be made up of a minimum of 18 tactical objective cards, chosen from a pool of available to your army. No more than one copy of each uniquely named tactical objective can be included in the deck. Now, obviously, as Richard already alluded to, you should have access to around 36 tactical objective cards, and you as a player, when you've witnessed your opponent's army, are then able to tailor a deck that should theoretically complement everything that your army is capable of achieving, but also take into account everything that your opponent brings to the table. Ideally, and this is just me sort of initially kind of thinking through, I think you've got to account for the possibility of going to 7 rounds. So I would always probably recommend 21 cards would probably be the sweet spot, because that would essentially mean that if it goes to 7 rounds, theoretically, you should always be able to draw, and it's still a lowish number that you can control the size of or the general kind of theme of what you're going to get. But I mean, from the outset, Phil, what do you think about deck construction? You fond of that?
Oh, for sure. And I've done it before because I'm pretty sure they did update the Maelstrom. Maybe it was in the White Dwarf. I can't remember. Or was it a generic rule that they've had for a while where you can discard up to 5 cards, I think it was, from your deck?
It was 5 or 6, but unfortunately that was never really enough to really refine it to the point that you felt like you still had.
I don't know, because we did that method when we did the No Retreat tournament, and I found that was enough to get rid of the cards that you definitely couldn't score. So if your opponent didn't have anything with the fly keyword, or didn't have any psychers, or you'd always get rid of supremacy, which is the score 6 objective. So the main cards that you...
It's actually only three objectives.
He's talking about domination.
Oh, sorry, domination. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of. So there's some cards that you can definitely not score against a certain opponent, though taking just 5 out is enough to get rid of those ones that aren't achievable at all. Now, it doesn't maybe necessarily give you enough to refine it to the point of what's the most optimal choices in terms of, am I going to just literally get rid of all the objective scoring ones because I'm actually going to go for the killing objectives as opposed to holding objectives, for example. So it doesn't quite give you that, but that was enough to make sure you shouldn't ever be able to draw a card and not be able to do it, theoretically.
Yeah, I mean, removing 6 cards is seemingly sufficient for getting rid of, the worst offenders, your dominations and all the things that you mentioned there. But I really like this additional layer of kind of customization, the fact that you can really define the kind of deck that you need to really complement your army. I mean, Rich, you've already kind of expressed your fondness for this whole thing. I'm assuming you kind of echo that sentiment.
Oh yeah, I've opened up various data card boxes I've got and dug out those tactical objective cards which are just sitting at the back and never been used to have a flick through them, and it's really interesting because now that you have to use a deck. You can't use the dice rolling thing. It's like GWs that you have to buy the deck of cards, and I think it's the right choice because it's what makes this new approach to Maelstrom work. Is you get your 36 tactical objective cards. Everyone starts with 36. And one thing that's important to mention is that if every army has the same, all other 30 of the cards are the same regardless of your army. But there is 6 that each army has, which are bespoke to that army and tailored specifically. And you can only get access to those based on who your warlord is. So we were talking about this before we started recording, that this is mostly going to be people for super players. But there's some of you out there who do like the soup on one of them. Whoever your warlord is, if affects which of the 6 bonus special cards you can take off, which are mostly, I suppose, affects knight players or people who are mixing in Imperium, so you getting that loyal 32 in there, for example. But whoever your warlord is dictates the extra 6 cards you can get. So if you've made your warlord a Astra Militarum company commander who's going to hide at the back so he doesn't get killed, then you have to take the Astra Militarum deck rather than the knight deck, for example. But what's interesting about the deck is there's the 6 cards which are bespoke to whatever you want to use to do that particular army. You've then got 30 additional ones. The first 12 of them are all about capturing objectives for either 1 turn or 2 turns. You've then got another 6, which are it's in a similar vein, but they're all about positioning on the board, denying certain objectives, getting out of your deployment zone. And then there's the final 12, which are all variations on doing psychic powers, causing morale tests, killing units, just lots of other stuff. So you have to take 18, which means you can, as you were alluding to before, take out the really hard ones like domination, which is to control all the objectives on the board. You can take out all of those. So you can literally take out all of the objective marker ones, and positioning, and just get rid of all of those, and then just play a game where all you care about is killing stuff and just doing stuff in the game, causing morale tests, doing psychic powers, killing flyers, doing all of that, and the objective markers are almost there for show. In some ways, there are some which still require objective markers nearby, but you can play. That's how you can play the game if you want. Or alternatively, you can focus entirely on playing those objectives, controlling the board. And what's fascinating is that you can both be. For me, it's fascinating is that you can both be playing that. One of you can be playing one way, and the other can play another. But you're trying to win a game with completely different approaches. And you mentioned just now, I'm conscious I'm rambling on a bit, so I'll let one of you jump in. You mentioned about being aware it could go to 7 turns and having making sure you have a bigger deck so you can still achieve cards. We can come on to why I disagree of that later on, because I think when it comes to that deck building element, which is what I'm really excited for, because you can control what cards you want. And if you want in your deck, you can say, so you can build an army even before you know what your opponent's going to be like. You can build your army a certain way to do certain things and be good at it, and then have objectives around that and cards that you want to be achieving that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I think 18 is probably an optimized situation if it's purely optimized around your build. Because again, there's as few cards as possible, but absolutely refined is always going to be crazy useful. I just think again, it's one of those things, isn't it? In terms of the strategy and kind of having backup plans and certain things. But I do accept that from a deck building perspective, there's definitely a point there. And on the topic of using your objective deck, I mean, not only do you now get to further customize your deck down to as few as 18 cards, but now the way the drawing system works and the way the playing of tactical objectives has again been really positively impacted. So essentially now how it works, at the start of the first battle round, each player shuffles their objective deck, obviously, and draws 5 tactical objective cards. Now previously, again, the way it worked was you drew and played the top 3 cards of your deck, and you had absolutely no control over which cards came into play at which point. Whereas now what they're saying is you draw 5 cards, and that 5 cards becomes your hand. Much like if you were playing poker or Magic the Gathering, other trading card games, and or gambling is available. Anyway, essentially you draw these 5 tactical cards, and should you choose to, if you feel unsatisfied with the initial 5 that you've drawn, you can essentially mulligan that hand, which is to essentially put that back into your deck, and then draw 4 new cards. And then essentially at the start of your turn, which is another really exciting element, because previously in the old Maelstrom, you didn't know what you were about to play at the start of your turn if you were going second. You witnessed what your opponent had done, and then you drew your 3 cards and played them, and you just hoped that the situation you found yourself in was complementary to the cards that you were about to play. Whereas now, because even if you go second, you can witness what your opponent's done, you can see what they're playing towards and what they've tried to achieve, and you can now start to play cards that are even more likely to achieve because you've seen the state of the game. So essentially what you do is you play 3 cards. One of those cards, by coincidence as well, you can play face down, which is a really interesting mechanic as well. So when I'm playing 3 cards, I could be like Secure Objective 1, Secure Objective 5, and something else. And I think that adds, again, another really interesting element, because, again, your opponent has absolutely no idea what that objective that the something else represents. And it could be Defend Objective 5, which, again, is a 2-turn Maelstrom card that you score after holding an objective for 2 turns, but your opponent may not know what objective that is, or will definitely not know what objective that is, so it becomes a really interesting guessing game. Plus there's a whole heap of other variables that come into play there. But yeah, look, I mean, adding that draw 5, play 3 system, I think is a really, really amazing addition to the game, and in many respects is the main contributor to this system now becoming a really viable and exciting way to play 40k. I mean, what do you think of that, Phil?
Oh, for sure. Like I said, a bit like with the dice rolls earlier. If you play it from D3 to a flat number, it's like this again takes out the complete randomness of it. I mean, it's still random to an extent in terms of your draw, but you can mitigate that by, if you've got 2 rubbish cards, you don't have to ever play them. You can just keep them in your hand. And I believe you can still discard at the end of your turn as well. I mean, unless I'm going completely mad.
Yes, Phil, you can discard, at the end of the morale phase, you can discard 3 of your in-play tactical objective cards. So not the ones in your hand, but the ones that are already in play. So if you did want to, there's any you then can't achieve, or you intentionally wanted to try and burn through your deck, they have to be through your in-play cards.
There you go.
No
one would know, Rich, that you did that wrong before.
No, because that's been edited out for.
Yeah, exactly. The mastery of editing has revealed the truth, which is, you could discard any of your in-play cards, which is
as opposed to what's in your hand. Yeah.
That actually makes it harder to do then, because you've kind of got to commit a card that either isn't very good just so you can discard it, which is sort of like a waste of an in-play card, right? Or you've just got to keep it in your hand and just deal with it.
Well, actually, Phil, it's funny you should mention that, because there are 3 special stratagems that you can now use in Maelstrom. The first of which is called Reprioritize, which allows you to take 2 cards from your hand and discard them and draw 2 new ones.
Do you discard them? Oh, yes, you do. Discard up to 2 tactical objective cards from your hand and draw 2 new ones, yeah?
Yeah, so that's one. So if you do have some cards in your hand you don't want to use, you can trade. Well, it costs you 2 CP, but you can do that. There's Tactical Foresight, which doesn't let you discard, but does let you check what's on top of your deck, and you can use that at any point during the turn.
That's pretty cool. So it's the top 3 cards, isn't it?
And you can choose to put them on the top or on the bottom.
That's
so if they're going to be in any order you like. So if there's some that you could achieve or will be helpful for you, you can put them on the top. If they're not helpful, put them on the bottom. And then the last one is Determined Push, which is where there's some potentially interesting, exciting, I'm not going to say shenanigans, but some cool stuff could come from it, which is that you select up to 3 tactical objective cards from your discard pile, which are the ones you've already achieved or discarded, more likely already achieved, and you shuffle them back into the objective deck.
Yeah, that's very handy, especially with some of those crazy ones out there that give loads of points.
That's definitely really good if you are going to optimize for like a really low deck number. So if you're going to go for your 18, then you want to score some that you can do and just recycle them. That would definitely be the way to do it.
I think that the thing with this is, again, even adding these extra stratagems to the mix, it just further kind of adds to the complexity of the system. And I'm, as I say, definitely in favour of all of this stuff. I think 2 CP is definitely expensive, but when you consider what you're getting, it seems really, really worth it, because obviously controlling the cards and controlling that aspect of the game is what will win the game for you. But as Richie kind of alluded to earlier, or at least I hope he did, and I didn't edit it out, but assuming I didn't, the whole kind of tactical nuance where, you or I could be trying to use entirely different strategies and entirely different approaches to the mission, combined with all of these elements, really gets really, really exciting. And, obviously there could be at very, very high level play with the way that Maelstrom cards have been done up to this point, certain levels of exploitation with certain stratagems potentially. But I really don't think that's the case. I mean, there are some very, very good stratagems out there. Not stratagems, sorry, very good tactical objectives out there that give quite a lot of victory points. There's the Imperial Fist one, right, Rich, where if you control 3 objective markers that you've selected, you gain D3 plus 3 or something crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so at when you play the card, you select 3 objective markers and you score 1 point if you control 1, D3 if you control 2, and D3 plus 3 if you control all 3 of them.
Yeah, which is bonkers.
The only nuance is you can't achieve it immediately, so you'd have to achieve it by the end of your opponent's turn.
Mm.
But that's a really good one. So it's like if I was a fists player, and I'd definitely be taking that objective.
Yeah.
And I'd definitely try and recycle that one back into my hand, because that's really solid. But equally, your opponent knows you're going to be doing it, so that's what gives some nuance to that so your opponent knows what you're doing.
What's interesting as well with that as well, because you could technically play that face down, but you'd still need to declare the free objectives, which is essentially means you'd never be able to play it face down, because you'd have to go, right, just for no reason at all, that objective, that objective, that objective, cheers. And it's like, all right, okay. That'd be very odd.
Yeah, so they might not know what it's for.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're playing Imperial Fists, they probably will, or they should.
Geez. They should. They'll learn.
Know your enemy, as it were.
Indeed.
But I think it's really exciting. What I like about it is that it's these new stratagems. So you're not just spending on stratagems on the latest meta or the latest combo. It's like you're actually using stratagems to change the strategy of the game you're playing. I think that's really cool, and it also means I need to go back through all of those articles on the Warhammer community where they talk about various new armies, and they've got some stratagem that relates to Maelstrom, and you're like, whatever, I'll skip that, because it might actually be really important now.
Yeah, it's true. There are actually quite a lot of Maelstrom-related stratagems out there that I think have definitely gone used. So, yeah, an opportunity for discovery. And again, I quite like that element of as well, because it's like sort of updating a new version of the game, because prior to this, as I say, Maelstrom was such an afterthought in my opinions and my estimations. I never really paid too much attention to it, but now it's actually kind of discovering a really interesting new layer to the game that I think is going to, create some interesting opportunities to people. And, not to badmouth the Eternal missions. I think the Eternal missions are quite good as well, and I'm sure we'll talk about those in the future in depth. But, from the outset, Maelstrom seems really interesting. And again, compared to, say, the Eternals or the famous ITC stuff, this seems quite deep and interesting, whereas, I think the ITC stuff has elements of this in it, i.e. you pick your secondaries and you go after what you want to go after. But I always find with ITC stuff, it's all very killy. It's just, kill all the stuff. Keep killing the stuff. You scored 50 points. Yay! It's just sort of madness. Whereas at least with this, there's a good level of understandable admin. I don't have to be sat there with a whiteboard going through all the weird extra bits and dealing with all that nonsense. This all seems quite succinct and quite nice, which is...
I think this also has room to evolve even more, because obviously there's a deck building aspect to it, but you're only deck building from one deck of cards, so you can't even now use those kind of generic tactical objectives. I mean, you could, because but you'd have to remove the 6, which are the duplicates, and that still gives you enough to build a deck, but that's exactly the same as any of the faction-specific ones. But do you remember back in 7th edition, they released another version of the Maelstrom tactical objectives? They were like super hard ones to do, but they scored really highly. So you could get sort of more of the D6s or flat free victory points, but they were like really tough objectives. And it'd be kind of interesting to see this evolve a little bit more into like a kind of card collecting game where they release a bunch of generic universal cards that you can then add to your deck to customize it even further. I think that could have some interesting scope to go in that direction.
Yeah, I'm not sure necessarily I want to see an already kind of expensive hobby turn into a TCG on top of everything else.
Not necessarily in terms of like buying blind packs of cards, but either like updates to factions that they can add in, because actually, I'm sure we'll discuss later on, a lot of the factions aren't very good, and that some are really good. So you're kind of playing at a slight disadvantage if you're doing, say, Astra Militarum, because their 6 faction-specific ones are terrible.
No, they are rubbish.
Yeah, no, they are. They're not very good at all. The Dark Angel ones are pretty rubbish as well. It's all like, it's really weird stuff the Dark Angels have.
I think it will be actually interesting to see if this does pick up, will they have to FAQ any of these any of the tactical objective cards? Because some of them, like the Fists ones we just pointed out, and the Thousand Suns have got some dubious ones as well.
Oh yeah, you cast a psychic power and get 6 victory points. Yay!
I mean, I imagine they wouldn't, just because it seems like matched play, like tournament style, is very much wedded to the Eternal War missions, and this is meant to be more designed for casual play. It's not to say that it couldn't be, but I don't know if there'd ever be that kind of shift over to the other side. Although, like I said, places like No Retreat do use a mix of both, and you do both at the same time, which I actually think is really fun to do.
Yeah.
One thing I would say on that, Phil, is that Maelstrom is in the same matched play section of Chapter Approved. So
it is match play. That is true.
It is in the match play section. So it will be interesting to see. But ignoring balance nonsense like that, which isn't nonsense if it does need to be fixed. I'm really intrigued by your concept of them releasing more card packs or something like that. Not blind packs. I think that's a terrible idea. And anyone from Games Workshop who's listening, please pay attention. That's a terrible idea. Don't do it.
Don't do it. Stay away.
But just basing on the wording they have in the book about you can choose a deck of 18. Your deck should be made of 18 tactical objective cards chosen from the pool available to your army. Is suitably vague that they could have some interesting, exciting surprises in the future.
No,
yeah, for sure.
Should we talk through the various missions that Maelstrom offers us?
Yeah, let's go for it.
There's really one mission with 6 variants, isn't there? Really?
Well, essentially, yeah. So what I'll do from the outset is I'll establish all the stuff that goes into a Maelstrom game, and then we'll talk about the variables. So essentially, you pick an army. It's battle forged, and meets all the relevant sort of criteria within that. You obviously then go through the whole stuff that we just discussed, customizing your deck, defining, bits and pieces and all that stuff. The battlefield is then created, so create the battlefield and set up terrain. The players place 6 objective markers as detailed on page 70, so place your objective markers around. Deployment, the players roll off, there's an attacker and there's a defender. Essentially, the winner of the dice roll decides whether or not they're going to be the attacker or the defender. The defender determines which standard deployment map is used in the battle and selects one of the deployment zones in their army. The attacker uses the other deployment zone. So again, as I've said in the past, that's really good because it means that the defender gets the pick of the best possible terrain, and then he gets to see the attacker deploy their entire army, and then they can deploy in response, in defense. Unfortunately, as I've discovered recently, the attacker deploys their entire army first, the defender then deploys their entire army. A player's models must be set up wholly within their deployment zone, and then when it comes to the first turn, the attacker still decides whether they go first or second, which I despise. But let's not get into that, because that's a whole can of worms.
But that was something we got wrong in the last podcast, because when we were going through them, we assumed that sort of incorrectly that it was fixed.
Yeah.
So if you're the attacker, you were going first. Yeah. But now you can kind of, sort of surprise your opponent by letting them go first when they're not expecting to.
Yeah, which is... Don't get me wrong. Again, I don't mean to kind of get into this, but I've used that in competitive games in the past. But I'm definitely not keen on it. It just doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't mean that I won't use it to my advantage when available, because, especially in competitive tournaments, because it's such a fundamental rule. I assume everyone's aware of it. But yeah, not a fan of that. But anyway, tactical objectives. This mission uses schemes of war, as we stated. Acceptable casualties. You can't win this game by tabling your opponent, so sudden death is not in effect. And then we've got battle length, which is random, which essentially means at the end of turn 5, you roll a d6 on a 3+, you move on to turn 6. At the end of turn 6, you roll a d6 on a 4+, you move on to round 7, and then at the end of battle round 7, the game ends. And then there's victory conditions, which include Slay the Warlord, which is killing your enemy's Warlord. First Strike, which is scoring a kill, so killing a unit within the first battle round. And Line Breaker, which is having a model within your opponent's deployment zone. In addition to that, obviously, there's the tactical objective element, which is all that stuff. So, pretty standard across the board, but there is always a nuance. So, the first of the missions is covert maneuvers. Rich, do you want to talk us through what a covert maneuver looks like?
I can, Dan, I can. So this is the most straightforward of the options, and the most, I think, the most fun in a way. At least most balanced for playing catch up. As you will recall, you can place one of your tactical objectives face down to keep it secret from your opponent, whereas the other two have to be face up. In covert maneuvers, however, at the start of each battle round after the first, so from battle round 2 onwards, whomever is winning in victory points has to have all of their cards face up, and whomever is behind has to have all of their cards face down.
Wow.
Or has the option. Can choose, yeah, they can choose. So they could play one face up to throw off their opponent. But the idea being, if you're playing catch up and you're behind, all your objectives are secret, so your opponent doesn't know what you're trying to do. Whereas if you're in the lead, your opponent knows exactly what you're trying to achieve, and that's a really cool little nuance there.
It is really interesting, isn't it? Because also as well, you start to think about, are there layers of gameplay that you can start to implement here that means that, ultimately you can create scenarios where you don't have to reveal until a very particular time, so you can kind of track what your opponent's doing and maybe purposely stay within arm's reach but just behind, so as you can kind of manipulate the way it's playing. And then from the winning player's perspective, do you want to kind of take your foot off the gas a bit so as you can then start to reveal things? Because potentially you could create some really interesting strategies here, where that you've got in your hand something like that Imperial Fist thing that we're talking about, or some other thing like domination or even supremacy, things that will score big. You might have like a handful of D3 victory point conditions, and you could always kind of stay one step behind your opponent until like maybe battle round 5, where you go, right, play, go for all this stuff, and then literally completely turn the game on its head in the last turns, which, yeah, it's interesting. What do you reckon, Phil? Would you be devious with this stuff? Would you try all that nonsense, or would you just sort of see how it goes?
No, I think that's probably overthinking how you can play ahead with the game, because obviously you've got 5 cards in your hand and you can play 3, so it's going to be quite difficult to do that potentially. It's almost better to just try and steam ahead, or that's what I would try and do. Like, even if I've got to have them face up, and just try, because if I'm ahead, it's probably easier to stay ahead. But I like it as a nice balancing mechanic. It makes it a little bit more challenging if you are winning, because with Maelstrom games it is quite easy, in the past to at least, like, steamroll your opponent by just doing really well and keep scoring more and more cards, especially if it's like the luck of the draw sort of thing. So this makes it a little bit more harder, which I like.
Well, but with deck tailoring, mate, you're exactly the kind of person I want to hear saying these things, because I can... Oh, I'll get you. Sorry, Rich, you were going to say...
Yeah, no, I think it's true. I like the... I think Phil's right in that I mean, if it was me, once you're in the lead, I don't know that it's in your interest to try and fall back, or to try and fall back because you have no idea what the other guy's got, because he could just massively overtake you, and then you can't catch up. But I think it's great for the person, because it puts kind of the person who's behind has all the knowledge. They know what their opponent's trying to do, and they know what they're trying to do. So in some ways, the strategy and the kind of the playmaking is in their court, because they have more knowledge than their opponent does, and the person who's in the lead just kind of has to read more how their opponent's playing, but they just need to keep getting points to stay in. They need to stay in the lead, but they don't know how the other person's going to try and catch up with them.
Yeah, there's only so many cards that really work being face down. So anything that's objective based or about board control is the ones you kind of need to keep secret, because there are a bunch of cards that your opponent can't stop you from doing. So casting a psychic power, or doing a guard order, for example. There's a lot of cards in your deck which you can put face up and you can be quite comfortable in just doing anyway, because it's pretty hard to stop them.
But there's other things you can do though, right? And again, I probably am overthinking this, but there's little things like, say for example, you could, and again, I don't think very many people are going to have this in their deck unless they're a Night Lords player, but you could potentially have something in there about morale tests, and you could force your opponent into believing that you're about to get them for failing a morale test because you've left a few models alive in one unit because you're like, oh yeah, they failed their morale test, and there's no reason for you to spend 2 CP on them because they're worthless to you now. But then you could create a scenario where they start going, why has he left those 2 alive when he could have so obviously killed them? And then they could go, all right, whatever, I'm going to spend the 2 CP and I'm going to keep the unit so you don't get that. And you go, fair enough, and just carry on because you didn't ever have it at all. You're just calling their bluff, which could be interesting. So you could, again, there's lots of. Again, I'm almost certainly overthinking it, but I like the fact that you can be that devious with it. I love being devious. As an Elder player, it's all very exciting from my side.
I think you're thinking it to the right level, Dan. Is that when you're behind, how are you going to sneak up? What are you going to do? And it gives that person who is behind, who is currently losing, who traditionally might just get steamrolled, that ability to try and like just mess with their opponent, outplay them, do sneaky things because they don't know what's going on. And I think that's a really cool element.
You could definitely sort of do some feint and sort of send a couple of crap units off after an objective. So your opponent will think that that's what you're going for, and therefore spend his resources killing some stuff that you don't really care about too much. Meanwhile, you're off doing something else elsewhere on the table. So I think there's lots. It's more like a mind game with your opponent, even if it's not necessarily doing anything huge. It could just be fun to have a little bit of banter with your opponent by going, "Oh, where are these guys off to?"
Yeah.
Yeah. But are you really, sort of thing? So yeah, that just is like a fun sort of social part of the game that you can layer on top.
Definitely. But no, I really like that. I think, yeah, it's an interesting nuance that definitely makes things interesting. And again, I think it does facilitate comebacks because, again, combined with the stratagems that you had previously and combined with other elements that you can play, you could tailor your situation to have a series of interesting cards in play that could, because again, it depends how long you want to play the long game. Again, understanding what your opponent has is cool. But anyway, I feel like we've probably exhausted as much as we need to say on that one. I like it. It's interesting. So let's move on to the Ambitious Surge. Phil, I didn't check from the outset whether you have these rules in front of you and can...
I do, yeah.
Tell us what it is, but I'm going to
Phil's a
ask you to do
professional.
it. So, Phil, tell us what the Ambitious Surge is all about.
So at the start of each player's movement phase, if a player has any tactical objectives in play, their opponents must select one of those tactical objectives. If that tactical objective is achieved in that turn or the subsequent turn, so only the next turn after, not all of them, it's worth 1 additional victory point. So basically, you get to select which of your opponent's cards is going to be worth 1 more. So you've got to be you've got to go for basically a hard objective for them to do.
And again, even then, or go for an easy one that baits them into other situations. It'd be like, I really don't want that unit to be charging up the battlefield at the minute. I know, I'll make defending that objective worth, additional +1, incentivizing them for staying in their deployment zone. I mean,
yeah,
that's always a very useful situation to deal with. Sorry, Rich, I assumed you were going to say something.
No, I completely agree with everything you just said there.
Fine.
Because, yeah, no, I don't have too much to add to it. I think it's a very interesting one because, yeah, like you said, each player then can give basically a bonus point to one of the opponent's objectives, and it could be the hard one because they're not going to be able to get it anyway. It could be the one you want them to try and do because it's not going to get them as many as the other ones. I think there's I think there's something. I think it's interesting. I don't think it's not as exciting as Covert Maneuvers. I think that's got lots to talk about. But I do like Ambitious Search because it adds that element of you have to pick.
Yeah.
Which of those things do you want because then you are directing in a way your opponent. It's like, I want you to do this, and they go, well, why does he want me to do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also like that it's a reward. It's not really a punishment. You're not taking away a card, you're not making a card one less VP. You're actually giving your opponent a bonus, but it's how you apply it to not be a bonus is the real trick, basically.
And also, you can technically apply it to the face down objective.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
So you could just gamble and say, I don't like either of your face up ones, I'm going to put it on the other one.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I'd assume, though, that you would assume normally the one that is face down is, I don't know, is it going to be the easiest one to do, or the one that's most fragile for you to be able to stop them from doing?
I mean, just as an example, your opponent could have face up, defend objective 2, and defend objective and secure objective 2. That's what they've got face up, and they're sitting on objective 2 with their whole army. You're not going to shift that, so that you could then say, I'll gamble on the other one. Say so to try and get maybe try and get them off objective 2. You don't know, and I mean, I was wrong. There's actually a lot to talk about this one. I mean, it's interesting because what you're gonna do.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot. I think again, it's a really, really simple mechanic, but it's again opens up all sorts of possibilities of bluffing, double bluffing. Even like using the face down card, because you could essentially have something a bit rubbish, or you can have two really amazing cards out on a face down one and make your opponent think, well, God, if these two he's willing to have face up, what must that be? You can start to do really interesting things, and it might be the face down one is something absolutely awful, but you can just sort of bluff things out of people. So yeah, it sounds pretty cool. The next one is critical objective. So the critical objective is at the start of each player turn, before putting any tactical objectives into play, that player can select one tactical objective card from the discard pile and shuffle it back into their objective deck. So essentially, you can shuffle things back into your objective deck, and then obviously depending on a number of variables, you could potentially see yourself drawing that out relatively quickly. And again, it's before putting any tactical objectives into play, so there's no chance of you drawing it that turn, but the fact that it goes back in is quite cool. So it gives you the opportunity to cycle through your cards, and if you've got something that's really, really powerful, keeping that in. In terms of actual gameplay, I actually think this is probably one of the least interesting missions, because essentially it just means that you're going to see tactical objectives come around again, potentially. But yeah, I don't necessarily know if it's that interesting, but it's certainly, again, it offers some tactical options, I'm sure, but yeah, it's probably one of the least kind of interactive missions in terms of the, outside of the generic Maelstrom rules, in terms of the dynamic between both players. I mean, what do you reckon of that one, Rich?
I don't know what it is yet, but I think there's some kind of deck building shenanigans that you can do with that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is offhand, but the idea of like taking some particular, I think to your point, no, it does potentially become the least interesting of like as the mission plays, because it's very much built around in theory you're basically going to want to achieve the same objective multiple times. Mm-hmm. So if you've built an army that's got one thing in mind that it's going to be doing, and you've got a way of working your deck correctly, that can help pull it out. Which this mission almost becomes who's playing the cards right.
Yeah,
and it may be really good. It may be rubbish.
Yeah,
it may not. It may not be as fun. I think it's. I mean, for me, just looking for it, it seems like a gimme for priority orders received. Like, as soon as you score that one, which is, for those not familiar, is it basically gives you an extra free. It's basically when you draw priority orders, you pick another one and place it on top, and it gives you +3 victory points. Mm-hmm. So it's an easy one It's basically just as a buff for any existing objective. So
Is it
if you
+3 or +1?
wait, hang on, I was going to check here what it says. Priority orders is you put another tactical objective on it, and if your warlord achieves it, you get an extra 3.
Is that one? I do hate that one. That's really hard to do as a guard player.
That's probably easy as a knight player.
Well, that's true.
Well, it depends though, doesn't it? Because unless they're, I can't remember which knightly household it is, but unless they're the one that has OBSEC, only one troop will just literally deny you that for a while. But I mean, who knows, right?
No, but you can give it to any. So you can give it you can give it like Big Game Hunter.
Oh,
So
fair
then
enough.
It just gives you an extra. If your warlord achieves, basically you give a specific objective just for your warlord, and if that warlord gets it, you get +3.
Gotcha.
That's true, because now it's not, because before you used to randomly draw a card for priority orders received. Now you pick one from your hand, so you've got more control over how that one works. So that is quite good, actually.
Yeah, it's very good. I think I think this critical.
It is good.
objective
I'm actually taking it out of my deck because while we've been talking, I've been building an example deck, and now I've read that I'm taking it out.
But critical objective, I mean, like I said, you're only going to be able to recycle one particular card every other turn.
Mm-hmm.
If it won't be very often. It's more likely you'll be recycling or attempting to recycle a handful of good cards.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll do one in turn 1, but then if you score it in turn 1, for example, but then you probably won't be going to replay it until turn 2 or 3 to actually score it. So, yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. It definitely favours having a lower, deck number, if you're doing the minimum 18 cards, which is a risky play, I guess. But in this mission, then it might favour it if you do want to play particular cards again and again.
Yeah. I mean, it's a logical mission. It makes sense from a game design perspective. But it's probably the least interesting. But nonetheless,
it could just not actually come up. You could recycle that card back into your deck, but then never draw it. So it sort of feels like it could be a game that just plays like a very normal mission of Maelstrom. Yeah. And I say normal while doing finger quotes that you obviously can't see.
Well, thank you for that.
I think it could be because depending on. I'm gonna have to probably play it some more to find out. But say for example, it's the first objective, because what it means is the first objective card you get, you can just put back into your deck. Mm-hmm. Or the first you score, rather. So say the first one you score was hold the line, which is being in your own deployment zone,
which is impossible to score in turn 1.
Well, okay. Aside from that,
say somehow that happened in turn 1. Yeah.
Let's say you had secure objective 1.
Okay.
And that was in your deployment zone.
Yes. Okay.
And you scored it in turn 1, and it's in your discard pile. You can then immediately put it back in your deck, and you already have, and you know it's in your deployment zone. That's a good card to have back in your deck because in theory, thinking from one's head there, I think it's good for board control lists. Mm-hmm. For that reason, because if you're controlling an area and you control it once, then you can get that card back, and then you can try and get it again. So it can maybe work for turtling lists, or if you've got a list that's army that can do multiple things, it could be good.
But the thing is, if you score any objective in turn 1, at the end of that turn, it's going into your deck. But you've already drawn up to your 5, so it's...
So you'll get it on turn 3 onwards.
Yeah, so it's sort of like I said, it's not recycling every turn, it's every few turns.
No, but every turn you can put another card into your deck.
Oh yeah, for sure, so you're potentially getting a bit of being on a wall.
Yeah, you can't do it, unless there's some very weird set of criteria, because you could... Yeah. Because you won't be able to have played the card until the start of your turn 1, so... Yeah, so you can, in a 5-turn game, you'll recycle 4 cards, potentially, which is fine. Although,
to be honest, there's some shenanigans you can pull if you have the CP to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing. In a 5-turn game, you'll recycle 4 cards, but you're only likely, and again, in a 5-turn card, you could only at best get 3 back in your hand. Because, turn 1, you play, say, so again, using your example, secure objective 1, cool, did it, discard it. Turn 2, goes back into my deck. Turn 3, I draw it again, way, and then got it. And then turn 4, put it back in my deck, and then hope that turn 5, I get it again. But it's not very likely to go that way.
I mean, the quickest way is the determined push stratagem, as you said, so you can take it from your discard pile and stick it into your... I know, that's taking your discard pile and then goes straight back into your deck, so no, forget it.
Same difference, right?
No, it's determined push and tactical foresight. Because foresight lets you look at the top 3 cards and put them back where you like, and if it wasn't in the top 3 cards, you then use determined push to shuffle the deck again, and then look at the top 3 cards.
Well, exactly.
So you can just I think if it was a CP, there are some ways to stack that deck and getting that objective again if it's particularly good for you. So, but then it becomes more about playing the deck game as opposed to playing the kind of a wider strategy. It could be fun. It could be fun. Don't know.
That blind magician who doesn't even call himself a magician, he calls himself a card technician, would be amazing at this. He'd know exactly where everything is all the time. He'd have a great time. But for most other people, it all seems a bit random. But look, there you go. So the next of the missions is Disruptive Tactics. Rich, do you want to tell us what that's all about?
Oh yeah, this is one of my favourite too. So at the start of each player's turn, before putting any tactical objectives into play, that player reveals the top 3 cards of their objective deck. If that objective deck has fewer than 3 cards remaining, reveal as many are available. That player's opponent can then select one of those cards to be placed on the bottom of the deck, and the remaining cards are returned to the top of the deck in an order of the opponent's choice. So what I like about that one is that it means that the reason I like that one, I don't like it as much as the other one, which is coming up, is that if you do have some super awesome card, like, say, the Thousand Suns doing spells or Imperial Fist killing stuff, or owning 3 objectives, and it comes up, it's like, nope, bottom of your deck, get away with you. You know what I mean? It means, that really good card that comes up, nope, out of here, go away.
Yeah.
You're not getting that one. It adds an element of you being able to disrupt what your opponent's got in their decks. If they've got some super combo comes through, you can mitigate that using this mission.
Yeah,
it's like a slightly tweaked version of one from last year's chapter approved, where you had 3 cards in your on play basically, but for each one you would draw 2, and your opponent would pick 1 to discard, and you would do that 3 times. So it was quite time consuming to do. But it was really good because it sort of meant you would always be picking the least best one to do. So that again sort of balances the game out. Whereas this one's slightly different, so it's sort of balancing it, but not to that extreme. So you're just taking the very best card and getting rid of it, as opposed to the best of all 3.
It says here that in terms of...
I was going to say, what is important is only when it's from the top of the deck, so you can't affect what's in the opponent's hand or in play.
Yeah, no, true. So it's sort of like for the future turns that are going to come up. So actually with that, you've got to be quite clever and think a few turns ahead, potentially, as well.
Yeah. But also, as well, what's interesting about that is you don't have to put something at the bottom of the deck, so you can obviously arrange the order of the cards if they've got some. If you reveal 3 relatively useless cards or objectively useless cards, you can still allow that to be in play as well. So it gives you that flexibility, but you can change like the priorities in which they appear, which is interesting because, well, it's just interesting because you can potentially. It depends on how many they achieve. There are some layers to this, and I think it definitely adds an interesting element to it. It gets, in my opinion, it starts to get a little bit frustrating when you've got a situation where your opponent is just kind of able to nerf or neutralize really powerful cards consistently, because obviously you'd quite like to have the reward of playing those things, but at the same time, yeah, I like it. I think, again, it's always interesting when you start to add that relationship and between your opponent and yourself in terms of what you're going to keep and what you're going to get rid of. So So yeah, no, I do like it. It's got so much kind of opportunity for gameplay that I think that's really cool.
I think the reason you don't like it is the reason I do, and so you'll definitely hate Mission 6 of the Maelstrom ones. But I think more than anything, disruptive tactics, what it does more so than potentially nerf your opponent is you get visibility on what's coming up.
Yeah.
More so than in any other mission. So you definitely know two of the next two cards your opponent's going to draw.
Also, it means you get to know what your cards are going to be. So it works both ways. It's not just your opponent knows what your cards are, you do as well.
Yeah,
so
true.
you're less likely to be needing that stratagem to see what the cards are going to be.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I don't dislike it necessarily. I just think it's one of those ones that, again, I don't know. We'll see how that one plays. That one's going to be an interesting one, but I'm still in favour of it. I think it is good. And again, it's an interesting set of mechanics for sure. It's definitely much more interesting than Critical Objective. Let's put it that way. So next one we have up is Territorial Control. Phil, what's that all about?
So at the start of each player's turn after the first, if that player controls more objective markers than their opponent, they can draw one card from their objective deck before placing any tactical objectives into play.
Mm.
So after the first turn, work out who controls the most objective cards. And then, so basically the person that's controlling the most gets to draw one card from their deck, basically. So it's a bit of a win more condition. So if you're ahead in controlling, you're going to get an extra card.
Which is...
But only in your hand, though.
Mm? Yeah, only into your hand, yeah.
Yeah, but it's before you play the cards, isn't it?
Well, what's also interesting is it's in every player's turn. It's not like at the start of the round.
Mm.
So you could potentially draw if you're ahead.
Oh yeah, I didn't
So
know
it's
that. Yeah.
so you need to make sure at the end of your turn you're on more objectives than your opponent. So at the start of his turn, you get a card into your hand which you can then play.
Oh no, wait,
in
no,
your
hang
turn.
on. No, that's not true. That's not right.
Is that not right?
No, it's on the wording. I thought I was excited when you said it. But no, it's at the start of each player's turn after the first. If that player controls more objective markers than the opponent, they can draw one card from their objective before placing any attack objectives into play. So it's not quite that if at the beginning of any turn you have more, you draw a card.
Okay.
It's only specifically on your turn if you control more.
Mm. I think though, again, going back to the deck building element of this system, when you draw this mission, because again, you know what the mission is when you start the deck building process. So you can then start to be like, okay, cool, well, let's start adding in more of the securing objective cards. Let's make sure that, I'm tailoring my deck to complement this system. Because then you can also end up in a really interesting landslide scenario where, you're drawing more control objective cards while you're controlling objectives, and that's going to be quite... and again, I'm sure both players will be doing that in that scenario, but maybe not. Maybe someone's going to, again, does that add a tactical element where that, or you gamble that your opponent is going to go heavy on objectives and you're just going to go super killy and just go for the throat, as it were, while they're trying to hold down all the objectives. You're just going on a murder spree or whatever it is, because you understand that they're going to be making lots of tactical sacrifices to get to all these different locations, whereas you're just going at them. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, it from the deck building perspective, there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do there.
Am I right in thinking there's no upper hand limit to the number of cards you can have?
Yeah, it's 5. Oh no, yeah. So no, if you're allowed to draw an additional card, you're allowed to keep that. So it's not like you have to discard it.
Yeah.
It just means that in the following turn you'll draw up to 5, and if you still control more objectives, then you'll get the 6th. Assuming that, yeah. But obviously there's a set of circumstances where, for example, if you had achieved none of your objectives and you had 6 in your hand, you wouldn't draw in the following turn. But if you still controlled all objectives, you'd get
an extra card. Yeah.
So yeah. There's scenarios there, but I think it's interesting.
Well, in theory, you'll always have 5 cards in your hand, unless you've just mulliganed. Unless you're playing territorial control.
Yeah. No, I like it. What I like about it is, again, it's the deck building element. It's the way that you can choose to play it, and the elements that can be at play. I mean, objectively speaking, or mission wise, going after the objectives is the smart play. But I think that's where you can get clever with it, because you can have a certain amount of confidence that your opponent is going to play that way in this mission, which can enable you to exploit that if you're able to, which I think is super interesting.
Yeah,
so.
Well, it's being able to draw one extra card is nice, but it's not a huge advantage.
No, because you can't play one extra, right? You just draw one.
So I think it's nice that actually, if you want to ignore it and just play your mission however you want, you can still do it, and you're not going to be terribly impacted by it.
Yeah.
But then again, your opponent could just be drawing some great cards because of it. So
I mean, it helps you get through your deck a bit quicker. There's any specific cards you're looking for, so it gives you a small advantage.
No, definitely. No, I like that one a lot. So the last one is Confined Command. So Confined Command is at the start of each player's movement phase, their opponent can select one tactical objective that the player has in play. So the logic here being is I've revealed my cards other than the one that's face down, assuming that I've decided to do that, and now my opponent can select one of my tactical objectives that are in play. That tactical objective is returned to the owning player's hand, and they can put a different tactical objective into play. Again, this for me is actually a really, really cool mission, because again, it adds in the interesting double bluff elements that potentially can be implemented. So effectively, you can disguise opportunities for your more critical objectives to come into play. So using the hand system, I could kind of go secure objective 1 while I'm sat on secure objective 1 thinking, my opponent won't like me having secure objective 1, so they'll definitely get me to put that back in my hand. But then in doing so, I could have defend objective 1 in my hand and then go, cool, I'll defend it instead. And then all of a sudden, my 1 victory point condition is turned into a 2 victory point condition, making my opponent, potentially regret that decision. Now, it's not always going to be that straightforward, because you've always got to have things in play. But I like the fact, again, that there's opportunities to kind of add layers to this and create a game within the game. There's also the whole face down card, because obviously your opponent has the option to go after, to go for the mystery box. You can gamble it all for the mystery box. And you could definitely put something into that that's a bit rubbish, and your opponent will be like, I'll go for the face down card, and then reveal that it's a bit rubbish anyway, and then replace it with something even more useful. I like it a lot, because again, in certain criteria, you as the opponent might choose the exact right card. Your opponent might have just gone, well, I just want to see if he goes for the powerful card or not, and you could put that down, and your opponent might be, there's some trickery going on here, I'll choose a different one. Or it might force a scenario where your opponent doesn't even opt to do it. I'm just checking the language. At the start of each player's movement phase, their opponent can select. So you don't even need to do it as well. So you could even enter in scenarios where you're saying to your opponent, don't worry about it, just keep them lot. And they're thinking, I really wanted you to get rid of one of these because I would have preferred to play this thing. So, no, I like this a lot. This is definitely up there as one of the better missions within the game, for sure. I mean, what's your perspective on it, Rich? I'm guessing from what you were saying before, it's your favourite, right?
It is probably my favourite one, because I think it's got a lot of good elements. Or you see, you've already come up with the counter to my original thought, which is like, I don't want you to have that one. Clear off.
Yeah.
don't have that card, but then a better one comes back. It's like, oh no, that's not what I wanted. This isn't one to plan at all.
Yeah. And I think
think
that's
that's-
the thing, though, isn't it, with Maelstrom? Because I actually think that's the really interesting part of the game is that is those layers upon layers of dastardly tactics that you can start to employ if you have a mind for it. Anyway.
And it's because interesting, like you said, like you gamble on the magic box. The other two are okay, but I don't know what that mystery one is. Get rid of the mystery one.
Yeah.
Because it's I don't know if it's the kind of thing that they might need an FAQ, but it's very specific. Cause in theory, if you go for the face down one, they don't have to show what it was, but they can't play it again.
Yeah.
So you'll have to. I'll call it a house rule for the sake of argument now, because technically it says it was returned to the hand and they put a different one in play. But if you have no idea what one is down in the first place, how do you know they haven't put the same card back?
Yeah.
So I would play
guess
that.
you would just
They'd
have to like put it to one side for a second.
Exactly.
Draw
Yeah.
another one down.
That's what sensible people would do. But we know who knows what kind of listeners we have. That is what you should do if you're a good person.
Indeed. I think you either reveal it, but I suppose revealing it, like you say, revealing it doesn't actually mean that you don't know. Interestingly as well, though, if you've already played a card face down and it was removed in this sequence, I suppose you can still play it face down again, can't you? Well, not the same one, but next card.
No, actually I'm just checking here. I was checking on the rules for face down card. It says you only reveal a face down card if it is either achieved or discarded. And this is returned to the hand, so that's neither. So in theory, if you did choose the face down card to go back into the hand, you don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I guess you don't necessarily need to play the other one face down, but because you're allowed up to one face down, you could still do your new one face down.
Yeah. I definitely, though, agree with the house ruling of if it is the face down card that you put it to one side and then play another one, and even if that one's played face down, at least you're acknowledging to your opponent in that sequence that it's definitely not whatever that was, and then obviously it can go back into your hand and everything else from there is fair game, but at least for that sequence of events you've illustrated that it's a different card without revealing what the card is. And again, that's just a little bit of a formality, but it's an essential formality because it's definitely core to the gameplay design in terms of how that mission works or how it's probably intended to work. But again, that's
but from the tactical standpoint, you could put not a rubbish, but like just an okay card face down or one you can't achieve, and then they pick that one, so you get rid of that, and then you put the one you can achieve that's super powerful face down.
Yeah, which is
it seems like that's a good tactic overall because at the end of your turn you can discard some cards anyway, but they've got to be in play, so it almost might as well be the one that's face down just to throw your opponent off.
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, the overriding sentiment in this Maelstrom stuff, and again, the reason why, after having read through this, I'm really excited to start playing some Maelstrom games, is I just think, again, it's making 40k interesting and making it more than just I've killed more than you and I've done a token gesture of putting something on an objective. And when I'm saying that, obviously the ITC fans in the room will know that that's a direct reference to how ITC works, but I'm not belittling that for what it is, but I'm getting I've spent a lot of time over the course of 2019 playing in ITC format events or being involved with games of ITC, and I'm really getting sick and tired of it as a system because it's very one-dimensional. And what Maelstrom is to me right now is the polar opposite of that. It's a totally different type of game. I think it represents a bit more of a thinking man's 40k, which I'm super in favour of because, 40k should be more than just I killed more than you, therefore I win because I've crippled your army, you can't possibly respond, and because of some arbitrary house rule system known as ITC points, or not ITC points, that's the tournament system, but known as their ITC kind of victory point conditions, I've run away with this game. And I think that's the thing, this is a system that rewards players for being tactically minded, for being crafty, for being nuanced, and I like nuance in my game systems. You know, I mean, when I was 13 years old getting into 40k, it was all about let's play to see who tables the other. But these days, it just seems really unsophisticated. And I know lots of people love ITC and will tell me that I'm wrong for asserting that it's just about tabling your opponents. But based on my experience of it, tabling your opponent is the most important thing in ITC. And as a result, that's why I'm sort of getting a little bit bored of it. Whereas Maelstrom makes me excited to play 40k again. So, yeah, that's my take on it. What do you think of Maelstrom, Phil? Keen?
Yeah, so I'm super keen to play some games. I really like the missions. I think I'd be quite happy if there was more around sort of mucking about with your opponent's cards a little bit more, because there's a few of them that are just about sort of reshuffling your cards, for example, that don't seem as exciting as a game mechanic than what some of the others could be. But I think there's some really good ones in there for sure. Like the very first one where, you know, if you're losing, all your objectives are hidden, I think is quite a fun one. I mean, if you're winning, it might be quite frustrating, but I think that's a good trade-off. So yeah, I think I think most of them will be really fun to play. I think a couple might just be not boring, but just a bit more of a normal game, if that makes sense. Because actually in there's no standard game where you just play the cards as you would in like a kind of classic Maelstrom game. So yeah, I'm keen to play them, see which will be like my new favourites.
And Rich, what's your vibe on Maelstrom to close out the segment?
I'm really excited by it. I think I've always liked the idea of the Maelstrom cards, and I like that they've made a way of making them really exciting. And when we're reading through Chapter Approved, I was actually really impressed by the Eternal War stuff as well. We're not talking about that right now, but I think it's the best Eternal War they've ever done. But I was more impressed by the Maelstrom stuff because it feels really different and new. It's using the cards in a way that makes it feel like it's a real game, and the mission's going to change and flow, but not in a completely random, snowbally, daft way like it has been in the past with the Maelstrom missions. I think the best ones, if just by reading from and talking about it today, I think it's Covert Maneuvers and Confined Command are the ones that seem the most immediately appealing for repeated play. But yeah, I'm really excited to start playing these.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there you go, guys. That's our thoughts and feelings on Maelstrom. Hopefully, by the end of this segment, you don't think we're a bunch of loonies. And, you know, obviously, hopefully you guys go out there and start playing this system yourselves. We'll update you on how we feel about these once we've gotten the chance to play more games together. Christmas is here, so yeah, we'll have a good opportunity over the course of Christmas to play some games of it. We're going up to Warhammer World during the Christmas break, so I dare say all of our casual fun gaming will be done using this Maelstrom system. So yeah, by the time we come back for our next podcast, we'll hopefully have a very clear understanding of how we actually feel about this. But really optimistic from the outset, and hopefully after listening to this, you are too. So there you go. Give Maelstrom a chance, guys. We think it's bloody great. Transitional noise. Woo! Thank you very much, everyone, for listening to episode 36 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, the very last episode of 2019. But not the very last thing that we're going to do. Oh no. Joe, do you want to tell them more about the end of year quiz thing that we keep plugging throughout, just to make sure that they know for sure?
So in case you weren't paying attention, we're doing a quiz at the end of the year, and it's called the Big Fat Quiz of 40k at the end of the year. Clearly I was paying attention.
Brilliant.
The Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year.
Yeah. Or the end of the year quiz in line with the end of the show quiz. I don't know whether that makes more sense.
Oh, that's true. That is also true.
It keeps with our usual, patter and synergies, but I guess Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year is also good.
But for the YouTube title, we need to make it 40k related. Otherwise, everyone's just going to think that, like, that Richard What's-her-face has just put on some pounds over Christmas.
That is true. That is true. Plus, also, the whole thing is if we call it the Big Fat 40k Quiz of the Year, we'll be able to benefit from the social algorithm that is promoting the actual Big Fat Quiz of the Year. So we'd be piggybacking off of their social media reach, which would be no bad thing, I'm sure.
Very good. Are we getting Richie to dress up as Rachel Riley?
Well, no, I don't think we're going to get him to dress up as Rachel Riley. I thought he was going to be dressed as Santa Claus.
Oh.
Which reminds me, Joe, you've got to get yourself a Christmas jumper for this whole thing.
Oh, God.
I know, you need a Christmas jumper and a Christmas hat.
Well, I keep looking for Christmas jumpers, and I keep going into TK Maxx. Other clothes shops are available.
Of course.
And all of the Christmas jumpers for men are, like, cringe-worthy at best. They're all so sexual, They're just like, it's just all about balls and pulling and tinsel and meat-based products.
I see.
And it's just like, I've got a child, and if she's going to come up to me and ask me questions about my meat-based products Christmas jumper, I'm going to have to go to her, and she can read as well.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
She is a sentient human being. She has the ability to read.
I know. So, we're a bit too close to Christmas now for me to fork out the 30-40 quid for the Warhammer Christmas jumper.
Now, you don't need anything good, mate. Go and get like the cheapest, most awful one you can find.
I can do that. I'll go to Asda.
Go to Asda and buy yourself a lovely Christmas jumper. That's what I'm going to be doing. Maybe Sainsbury's. Just because there's a Sainsbury's closer to me than an Asda. In fact, I don't even know where Asda is. It would be a hell of a mission for me to get to an Asda right now.
Yeah.
I think the nearest Asda to me is in...
For a long time. I thought Asda had gone extinct. I thought they'd gone the same way as Safeways. Do you remember them?
I do remember Safeways, yeah, absolutely. No, I think Asda is merging with Sainsbury's, aren't they?
What?
I know, it's a whole kind of corporate merger going on. And Sainsbury's has already merged with Argos. So they're going to become like a super retailer before long.
Can I for the next year get a buzzer that when I press it, it says something like tangent alert?
Tangent alert!
That I can just press to interrupt you guys so we can maybe get back onto topic about talking about the end of the year 40k quiz, Big Fat Quiz of the Year.
Oh, yeah, that's what we were talking about, isn't it? Would it be nice, actually, if at the end of the music I put together a little montage of some of our best tangents?
Yeah.
I mean, if you have to.
The ones that you have to step out because they're a bit too risky and I've gone a little bit too far.
I mean, there were definitely bits that I've edited out over the years, Joe.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't talk about what the topics were that got edited, but you came close sometimes to being inappropriate.
I don't believe that for a second.
You spent too much time as a van driver, Joe.
That is my problem. It's too much like the Daily Sun and the Daily Sport reading.
That's it.
And just you spend a lot of time alone.
It's true.
In your own mind.
With only your thoughts.
With only my ever darkening thoughts and the ever crushing fear of reality.
That's it, man. That's it. I was looking at my buddy's website for Christmas themed apparel. Buddy Lee Revel, revlevel.com. I was seeing if he had done any Christmas themed shirts. He hasn't. Missed opportunity. I'm sure we could have blagged a bunch of that from him for free.
Well, then my mate linked me into some hoodies during the year, and I shared them to the group, and no one said anything. But they were of like Napoleonic like red coats and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And so your hoodie is like the coat of a red coat with the white sash. Looks just like our picture.
Oh.
Get a name on it. and no one said anything. So I tutted, and I went piffle, and then I sat in the corner and cried.
I found a Christmas jumper with a T-Rex shooting lightning out of its mouth.
Well, that's one to go for. There was another one with cats riding pizza, which I was looking at.
These are all good options. Phil, would you like a good Christmas jumper? You got one ready to go, or were you
I've already got one. Yeah, no, but none of them have, cats and pizzas on them.
No, or T-Rex.
That doesn't sound very Christmassy at all. That just sounds like a jumper.
But the cats have got Christmas hats on, Phil. Come on, get with it.
Oh, right, okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, exactly. And the T-Rex has also got a Christmas hat on. I dare say if you were to buy this, it's probably made of that horrible, like PVC style material. It's,
quite often...
If you move too quickly, the friction would just set you on fire.
Yeah.
Or quite often they're just sweatshirts with a knitted fake print on them, which I think is just the worst.
Yeah, I bought a Superman one like that, and I was forever disappointed. But it's Superman, so I could never be.
So there you go. But yeah, Richie needs to be dressed as Father Christmas, and the rest of us need to be in appropriate Christmas apparel. So as when we put the episode out on the 25th of December, then it will all seem relevant. Although I will caveat this right now, the aspiration is that it goes out on the 25th of December. It may end up happening a couple of days after the fact, because we're filming it on the 22nd, and I am yet unprepared for the amount of editing that it will probably involve. So it's going to be quite a task. So my goal is that you will have it on the Christmas Day as a Christmas treat, but I reserve the right to be wrong about that. But I'm sure we'll update you over our various social channels when it is available. But the aspiration is, the 25th. So check back on the 25th and see whether or not I'm lying to you. It's not my intent to lie to you, but sometimes you have to do it out of necessity. The hype must move forwards.
Yep.
So there we go. But look, there you go, guys. Look, it's the end of 2019. An incredible year within the world of Warhammer 40,000. A lot happened, while at the same time many of it sort of stood still. In terms of new releases and new things, there's been an absolute slew of incredible things that have come out. But then when you think about it in terms of new factions or new armies, the only thing that we've really had, arguably, that's new is Chaos Knights, which again isn't even super new because, there were already Renegade Knights before them. Obviously, Sisters have just dropped, and they're going to be really exciting in 2020. We got new Space Marines, which is obviously nice, but it's just, Space Marines with extra bits. So yeah, again, really excited to see what happens. A lot of rumours about what we can expect to see Christmas Day from the good people of Warhammer community. A lot of speculation that a Primarch could be returning. Phil, you feeling positive about that?
Do you know what? I'm a bit sceptical, but it's now been a few years since Gilliman's come out, so it could be on the cards for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think Gilliman came out in 2017, early 2017.
Just at the beginning of basically the same year as 8th edition, but at the very start of the year. So that's got to be 2.5 years now, or almost 3.
Yeah, it'd be 3 practically. Yeah.
I don't think the game needs another Primarch, but I wouldn't be surprised if they throw one in there.
I think the narrative does, though, and I think if it ends up being Lionel Johnson, it will definitely be interesting. Joe, you're our heresy aficionado. The Lion and Gilliman had a very interesting relationship, didn't they?
They never really saw eye to eye. So when during the heresy, when Earth got cut off, Gilliman set up the Imperium Secundus, so the Second Imperium, and although he was probably right to be the ruler for it, he didn't want to be, and he wanted Sanguinius to be the leader of it. And obviously Lionel Johnson being the cocksure first he is known as, took a bit of offence to this. And then because Sanguinius wasn't about for a while, Gilliman kind of gave it to him. And so there's a bit of tension between the two of them, basically.
Yeah, I think it could be really interesting from a narrative perspective. Also, as well, me and Phil were talking about this from a 9th edition perspective. I think it'll be really exciting to see what Games Workshop start to release that reflects the more dark side of the Imperium moving forwards. Because I think a lot of 8th edition, although obviously we've had stories and, bits of narrative about, what's going on down there in the Dark Imperium, in the Scepter Nihilus or whatever it's called. I think, it's going to be really interesting to actually start to see some models or some ranges that have things about them that reflect that side of the universe as well. So I remain hopeful that that's something they might start exploring as well. I mean, does that seem like something you think could happen in 2020, Joe?
I'd quite like to see that, actually. It's something that they've kind of been doing in Age of Sigmar, which I'd kind of like to see reflected in 40k. Like how they've done the elf range. So they killed off all the elves, and then all the elf souls spent a period of time inside the belly of Slanesh, and then they were released by the leaders of the elves, and then reforged. So they're good guys, but every force is quite clearly tainted. So you've got the Daughters of Cain, who are witch elves, and the old witch elves, but they're tainted, so they're half snake. And then you've got the Ideneth Deepkin, who, like the lower down, weaker people in the elf society, came out with no souls, so they constantly have to feed on souls, but they're good. I kind of like to see that shown in 40k. I'd like to see a race of good people that are either tainted, but they're still fighting, or they're so corrupted they have to do bad stuff for good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, mate. Yeah, be interesting to see for sure. Yeah,
that's my input.
There you go. Well, thank you for that. That I have stopped talking now. Time for the next bit. So yeah, look, that has been our contribution to the hobby in 2019. As I say, really proud of the fact that we've managed to produce a whopping great 26 episodes we've put out this year, which is pretty incredible. So yeah, the last episode we put out in 2018 was episode 11. We've put out 25 episodes this year, which is pretty amazing. I haven't got the stats or figures or whatever, but I dare say that's quite a lot of Warhammer 40,000 chattery that has taken place between the 3, 5, 6 of us that sort of contribute to this podcast on a regular basis. Maybe that's something I should research and actually have an answer for in terms of how many hours of 40k podcasts we've created this year. But look, I mean, all of the self-congratulatory nonsense aside, again, thank you very much, everybody. We hope you have an incredible Christmas, and obviously we wish you all a happy new year, and we'll be excited to see you again in 2020. So from myself and everyone else here, thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Happy New Year, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Merry
Christmas. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yes, obviously, the other holidays are also available. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Could you tell the difference between a goat wailing and a goat giving birth?
I don't know. I'm not a professional goat.
What's a professional goat?
I've got 2 weeks to operate. Get my pitch license. Get a flower stand.
Yep.
Put it up.
And
meet
to
them
be
on the
more
same day.
successful at it than a guy who is seemingly doing it as his only source of income.
Yes. Well, I would if I could. I'd spend most of my time just in my pants, just lying on the floor,
So you-
panting like a dog.
But by the way, when I was having that conversation, were you rattling things around in the background, much like you're doing right
Oh
now?
God, no! To assume that I would do anything other than sit here and stare blankly at a wall.
You're gonna have
Talk
to.
you.
You're going to have to listen back to this. It sounds like you're ferreting about the place in the background. Are you making noises unnecessarily?
No.
That must just be
No.
my imagination. Phil, did you hear anything, or is it just me?
It's totally him. It's always him. We know it. We just can't prove it.
Come on,
Oh,
goat
Like
sounds.
That was surprisingly good.
And that is the end of this week's podcast. And as we all endeavour, we must live by these immortal words from the great film known as Galaxy Quest. Never give up. Never surrender. And that's it.